Number 10. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom are the children of Storm and Dr. Doom. They come from the novel series X-Men: The Chaos Engine, which is actually a trilogy wherein we explore what would happen if 3 great villains took control of the Marvel Universe, creating their own version of a perfect world using the Cosmic Cube. It starts off with Doom's variation on this world. In this reality, Dr. Doom has made Storm his wife, and she rules by his side as his Empress. The union of these powerful characters produces 2 children, Kristoff and Kadira. We can assume, of course, being the children of both Doom and Storm, that they would be physically, mentally, and demonstrably powerful when it came to their abilities, especially being raised by these 2 powerhouses. Also, if I wasn't clear about this is an alternate reality, so if you're like, when did this happen? It is not main continuity. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more children of the X-Men, they have a lot of kids if we, surf through the multiverse, so we could do it for you. If you want that part 3, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nocturne. Nocturne is the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Obviously, not from the main continuity. In fact, Talia Wagner is known for being a part of a multiversal hero team, the Exiles. Nocturne is from the alternate reality of Earth 2182. In fact, back on her home reality, which first appeared in Millennial Visions, Talia is also known as a member of the X-Men team, fighting alongside her father, Nightcrawler, who is actually their field leader. She is a low-level telepath with incredible superhuman agility skills, the ability to wall crawl, and the ability to fire powerful brimstone hex energy bolts, something inherited from both her father and her mother. Nocturne's physical appearance is also similar to her father's, a bit demonic looking, and of course, blue. All my blue X-Men. Top 10 blue X-Men. Actually, I feel like there's a lot of X-Men that are blue. Or mutants that are blue, maybe? There's a lot of blue mutants, for sure. I don't know about X-Men team members. Number 8. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine from the ultimate reality of Earth 1610. His powers are similar to his father's, but in this reality they're believed to work a little bit differently. As opposed to just being insane healing powers, Jimmy's power set in this universe as a mutant is believed to be based more in survival. So these powers aren't necessarily just about healing, but survival instincts and capability, meaning that Jimmy is just much better at surviving and evolving to survive than anyone else alive on the planet. And I mean that because in this reality, Wolverine eventually dies, so really Jimmy is the only one left alive who's really good at surviving. Jimmy Hudson has also been bonded to a poison before and gained control of his poison, which are basically alien-like beings resembling symbiotes in look and abilities, but ultimately a different alien race themselves, called poisons. So yeah. Jimmy is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda Lencher, although Wolverine urges him through a letter when the truth of his connection to Jimmy is revealed that he actually shouldn't focus too much on, who his biological parents are. Jimmy was raised by adoptive parents. His dad actually served with Logan in the war and agreed to look after Jimmy in his father's place, even giving the young boy his own family name. Hudson. Number 7. Esme. Esme is one of the main Stepford Cuckoos. Well, I mean, I guess they're all pretty main, but you know what I mean. She's probably one of the most well-known if we're talking offhand about how many of the Cuckoos you can name. Esme and the other Cuckoos are basically like the children of Emma Frost, although as I've said before, not children that she had consensually. And I didn't say that before in this list, but if you've heard me talk about the Stepford Cuckoos and their relation to Emma, yeah. Instead, these were lab babies basically made from Emma's eggs that were stolen from Emma while she was in a comatose state. Esme, like the other Cuckoos, is kind of like a genetic clone as well as a child of Emma's, and Emma actually does consider the Cuckoos to be like her daughters. She treats them as though they were her own flesh and blood, and often her own responsibility, kinda stepping in to like play mom sometimes, although she does give them freedom to make their own mistakes. I guess what I mean is Emma isn't known for being like a controlling kind of parent. She's like, I'm here when you need me, otherwise you do you. More recently in the comics, Esme, known for her diamond form and powerful telepathic abilities, teamed up and primarily dated young Cable. Well, technically all the Cuckoos were dating him at one point, though I would say Esme was basically the main squeeze of young Cable, and the sister that he was most taken by while he was dating all of them. And if you're like, whoa, how did that happen? The Stepford Cuckoos, they share things because they're kind of like a hive mind. So they're like, we'll just all date this person. It's cool. Also Krakoa. Everyone's dating everyone. Number 6. Akihiro. Akihiro is the son of Wolverine and his wife Itsu. Unfortunately, before Akihiro was even born, his life took a turn turn for the worse. Along with inheriting his father's powers, I think he also inherited some of his tragic luck. Wolverine has the worst luck, I think. His mother, Itsu, was killed before she could give birth to him, assassinated. The child was believed dead, but in reality he had been cut from her womb and possibly, due to his inherited healing powers, miraculously survived. Although, that's not clear, because usually your powers don't manifest until puberty, but sometimes your powers manifest when you're in the womb. I mean, look at Professor X with Cassandra Nova. Apparently that's a thing that happened. Akihiro would grow up and become a pawn of the villain known as Romulus. For most of his life, he'd also be known as Daken, a cruel nickname given to him when he was a child, being raised by his adoptive parents. The nickname was given to him because of his mixed race appearance, being part American and part Japanese. Though to be clear, his parents weren't the ones that gave it to him. It was people around his parents. Akihiro's powers are similar to Wolverine's, though his bone claws are a little bit different in terms of placement and appearance. Like his father, Akihiro is also known for being a skilled fighter as well. The apple does not fall far from the tree when it comes to fighting abilities. Number 5. Xandra Naramani. Xandra is Professor X's daughter, who is created out of his genetic material and that of his lover's genetic material, the Shi'ar Magistrix Lilandra Naramani, after both of them were believed dead. As such, Xandra grew up to become Shi'ar royalty and also spent a good amount of her life hunted because of this, with various parties attempting to use her for their own means. Xandra is an extremely gifted telepath. She can manipulate others' minds, read minds, and can create hyper-realistic telepathic illusions. Number 4. Ruby Summers. She was the ex-offspring used in our oh-so-clickable thumb for the part 1 to this list, and although she was on my extended list for that part 1, my long brainstorm that I came up with, I didn't get around to talking about her because I kind of reached a point where there were too many Summers children on that list, and I was like, I don't want to make this a top 10 children of Cyclops. We got that list, and also that's not what this list is. What can I say? Sykes got strong genes. That's why Mr. Sinister is so obsessed after all and is known as the #1 fan of the Summers Club. Scott Summers is Ruby's dad in the alternate reality she hails from, and Emma Frost is her mother. This makes Ruby fairly powerful, not at the level of Hope or X-Man, but still pretty impressive. She's also super cool looking, which is an added bonus. Ruby hails from the alternate Earth of 1191, the home reality of famous X-Men ally Bishop. Ruby is also capable of emitting optic blasts like her dad and his brothers, but she has more control over when and how she emits these blasts, unlike her dad who's like, I literally need a visor. Ruby also comes with her Ruby form, which like her mother's Diamond form, grants her invulnerability and pretty much immortality. Number 3. Olivier Raven. Olivier Raven is legally known as Olivier LeBeau and is one of the alternate reality children of Gambit and Rogue. Honestly, I feel like there are not enough of these kids out in the multiverse. I don't know if that's just me. For a couple as famous as Gambit and Rogue, I mean, you would think that we'd have a lot more kids from them, at least through the multiverse. Though admittedly, I'm not quite sure that Rogue and Gambit are really the kid-having type, at least from what I've seen in the main continuity. They seem pretty content with just having their fur babies right now. So maybe they just aren't super into having kids as a family. Olivier hails from the reality of Earth 41001, the reality of Gen Next, a group Ollie is part of. He has powers similar to his mother's, except he has better control over them and is able to choose when and how much power, life energy, and memories he absorbs via physical contact, or doesn't absorb in cases where he just, wants to make physical contact without using his powers. He can also absorb powers on a more permanent level, although he has less control it seems over when this happens. Like his father, he also seems to have some charm-based powers. Either that, or he's just charming. Number 2. Proteus. Proteus is the son of Moira McTaggart, who before I would count more as like an ex-ally, but with recent revelations we can definitely consider her a member in the same way we might consider someone like Charles Xavier. It turns out that Moira herself was a mutant this whole time, possessing unique reincarnation powers. She has also been known for being a leader and teacher of X-Men groups before, including the time when she led a team that Professor X then recruited, sending them into Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. Not Krakoa as we know it now, but Krakoa as it was back in the day when it was like a monster island. Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, son of Joseph and Moira McTaggart. He is currently one of the 5 on Krakoa, and his powers as part of that team are mainly used to warp reality, allowing the non-viable eggs that Egg, formerly known as Gold Balls, produces to become viable for life. These eggs are then used to grow new versions of fallen mutants. Proteus is an Omega level mutant who requires hosts to survive. Initially, Kevin had a body, but now he's basically just pure energy. The hosts he controls and feeds off of eventually are exhausted and killed by that energy drain, making him not just a powerful psionic mutant, but also a powerful energy vampire as well, unintentionally. Number 1. Legion. Legion is the son of Professor Charles Xavier that was conceived when he had a love affair with Gabrielle Haller, which is where Legion gets his legal last name, as his given name is David Haller. Legion is so powerful because he suffers from a severe dissociative identity disorder, where he has more than 100 personas residing within him. Each persona has a number, many of names, and they each have their own specific power set that show up whenever they take over. Because of this, there is almost nothing that Legion isn't capable of. He can manipulate matter and time. We've seen him time travel and completely warp reality as a result of his possible abilities. He also has some pretty powerful hair, which I gotta say, I'm happy that he still rocks even now in the current modern day comics. He's still got that sweet hair. So tall. Number 10. Crusader. Crusader is the daughter of X-Men team member Rogue and Avenger Captain America. I know, a weird combination. But in the reality of Earth 9811, these two ended up together after the heroes and villains on Battleworld decided to call a truce. Remaining there, they settled down and raised families, putting their differences aside. I'm not sure how their relationship worked, with Rogue not really being able to touch people and all at this point, or how she had a child considering that, but perhaps, like on Earth 616, she eventually was able to work through the trauma causing this side effect of her powers. Or perhaps the Captain America of Earth 9811 was immune to her involuntary energy and power draining effects. Either way, Sarah is their daughter. She gets much of her power from her mother, or rather she gets much of her power from the power her mother had absorbed in her day, meaning that Sarah is super strong, durable, and can fly. She is also considered worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer and wields her father's shield. Number 9. Wolverine. I really wanted to put Laura Kinney higher up on this list because, well, I love her so much, but unfortunately the psionics are just always pushing some of my favorite and most powerful characters further down on these lists. Those psionics. Oh well. Laura Kinney as X-23 and now Wolverine is still one of the most powerful children of the X-Men around. Some argue that she is more clone, while others argue that she is more biological offspring of Logan, but in reality, she's kind of a bit of both. She was created as a female clone of Wolverine after his genetic material was combined with that of her creator, scientist Sarah Kinney. Sarah noticed that there were damage spots basically in the samples of Logan's genetic material that they had, which was why their cloning process had been unsuccessful up to this point, and so she used her own genetic material to patch those rough spots, which made Laura a female clone. Sarah was forced to carry Laura to term as a surrogate by her jealous colleague Xander Rice, as punishment for even creating the female clone to begin with, a strategy that admittedly had not been approved. Laura has powers similar to her father. She has a regenerative healing factor and was also trained from birth to be a skilled fighter, bodyguard, and assassin. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about more children of the X-Men, there are a lot out there in the multiverse. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality of 13729. Yeah, sadly Storm and T'Challa have never had a child together in the main continuity. I know, it's a bit of a bummer. Unless they had like a real secret child that we just don't know about yet, but I doubt it. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm, that she's a skilled combatant as well. As while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she is also an extremely skilled fighter. And if she's Black Panther's daughter, then she should definitely be a skilled fighter. I mean, you got two amazing parents that are both amazing fighters, so just saying. Number 7. Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the son of Charles Xavier and Mystique, if you can believe that. I know, it's pretty shocking. Charles Xavier II was technically born into the reality of Earth 616, where we later find out that while Mystique actually took the form of Moira when giving birth, Charles actually knew that he was in a relationship with Raven, so it wasn't like a trick of hers. They were actually just wanted to be together, I guess. This version of Charles, however, is an all grown up one from the alternate future of Earth 13729. When his powers first manifested, he accidentally killed his adoptive mother and ended up later joining forces with his half-brother Raze, another child of Mystique's sired by Wolverine, another child of the X-Men. Charles Xavier II has a brilliant and conniving mind, and like his father, is an immensely gifted telepath, capable of using his powers to bend others to his will. Number 6. Polaris. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto, and while you might not think of Magneto as being an X-Men, considering, he started out as an X-Men villain, he has also worked with the team before and even served as a member himself. Heck, at one point he was in charge of the whole New Mutants crew, let's not forget that. Magneto may have some questionable methods when it comes to getting justice that put him on the spectrum of villain, but I think at the end of the day, he's just trying to do what's best for mutants. Or at least what he thinks is best for mutant kind. Polaris, like her father, also has magnetic-based powers, which, like her father, are also pretty impressive. Polaris is considered an alpha-level mutant and recently got to join the X-Men team herself after being elected to join them in the Krakoan X-Men elections. Psychic elections. Imagine if we could all just vote psychically. That would be awesome. That would be so much easier. You would just sit down and you'd be like, who do I want to vote for? Done. Number 5. Cable. Cable is the son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, non-X member Madeline Pryor, who later becomes the villain known as the Goblin Queen, and another X-Man's, Jean Grey, who kind of becomes like an adoptive mother but who also possesses Madeline's memories of raising baby Christopher. Because comics. Cable is Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, often referred to as just Nathan Summers or really just Cable, although back in the day we did know him as Baby Christopher. Cable as a baby was kidnapped by Apocalypse and infected with the techno-organic virus. This is the only thing that makes him weak-ish, but really he is still amazingly strong as he can even fend off that virus, containing it to one side of his body using his psionic powers. That in and of itself is pretty impressive, as the techno-organic virus is generally known for being, well, unstoppable. Even with his psionic powers mainly preoccupied, Cable is still a hard one to beat, as he has so many combatant-based skills that he brings to the table, and he is also an experienced time traveler besides. Number 4. Rachel Summers. Yes, get ready, because many of the most powerful X-Kids out there just happen to be Summers related, so yeah, get ready for that. Honestly, I've always wanted to do a video just to explain the complicated nature that is the Summers and Grey family tree, which honestly is a lot, and it's very timey-wimey. Rachel herself is one of those very complex kids of theirs. She is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth of 811. In that reality, she was made into a hound, a weapon used to hunt down mutants, even being one herself. Rachel is an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic who also has the ability to chronoskim and manipulate time, even traveling through it. Rachel is also known for being an avatar of the Phoenix, at one time actually considered the true avatar for it, but then later having the power sort of dialed down to a mere echo of it. So she was no longer the true avatar, they were just like, you just have a thing, and it's not even like the real Phoenix Force, but it's like a version of it. Still, the seeming piece or echo of the Phoenix Force that resides within her has been known to flare up from time to time, or her connection to the Phoenix Force, however we want to see that, occasionally boosting Rachel to an off-the-charts level of power. But like I said, that doesn't happen all the time. Number 3. Hope Summers. Hope is the adopted daughter of Cable, who was originally known as the Mutant Messiah Baby. Cable saved Hope from Bishop, who basically wanted to destroy her. In Bishop's reality, the Mutant Messiah would end up causing the event that led to the oppression and persecution of mutants. However, in Cable's reality, the Mutant Messiah would grow up to become a savior, so you can see why these two were opposed on this topic. For the X-Men of Earth 616, the Mutant Messiah was the first new mutant to have been born since basically M-Day, and so she brought hope to the mutants of the 616 reality. Cable body slided with Hope to another time to raise her in safety. He would end up naming Hope after her adoptive mother, his love who died, Hope, and she got the Summers name from Cable himself. But although she looks a lot like Jean, she actually has no biological relation to the Summers or the Grey families, at least not that we know of. Hope's mutant abilities allow her to copy the powers of anyone within a certain range. Hope also gains access to these powers without struggling at all to use them, receiving them basically at their peak level and with the auto knowledge basically of how to use them. So if you're like, oh, she's gotta figure it out, no, she's just instant god mode with those powers basically. Number 2. Scarlet Witch. Wanda is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. She has used her powers to completely warp reality the world over, and her chaos magic has pulled off other immensely world-changing feats, such as flipping the alignment of all major heroes and villains in the comics during the events of Axis. Initially, her chaos magic powers were believed to be somewhat mutant in origin. In fact, they were kind of presented initially as Jinx-like mystical mutant abilities during her first appearances. However, we've since learned that both Wanda and her superpowered overpowered brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, were never really mutants at all, nor were they related to Magneto. However, they still spent a good amount of their life around Magneto, who secretly believed them to be his children, and then another good amount of time thinking that he was their actual father, until it was revealed that this was all due to manipulation by the High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary just coming in and messing pretty much everybody up when it comes to their backstories and origins. Wanda herself has never really gotten along with the X-Men, especially since the events of M-Day, but she is still considered, I think, a part of Magneto's family, and a powerful one at that, regardless of her status as a mutant or a non-mutant. I know there are some people out there that want to be like, it never happened, but like, they still spent a lot of time together thinking that they were family, so I think we can still count it, friends. Also, make Wanda a mutant again. Do it. Make it happen. Give me Wanda and Quicksilver back. Number 1. X-Man. X-Man is Nathaniel Grey, the lab-born child made by combining the genetic materials of both Jean Grey and Cyclops. So basically like Cable, but if he had been made perfectly by villain Mr. Sinister. He actually hails from the alternate reality of AOA, Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295. Here, Sinister created him to use as his own weapon, but of course, Nate being so powerful, managed to escape Sinister and instead ended up being raised by Forge of Earth 295. He is considered one of the most powerful mutants of all time, which would also make him one of the most powerful children of the X-Men out there. Nate can warp reality, resurrect the dead, resurrect himself, travel to alternate Earths and dimensions, and even manipulate the time stream. He is basically the most OP of characters when it comes to the Marvel Universe. And if you've seen artwork of him, you will probably recognize him as someone who looks like Mutant Jesus, which yes, he is god level, so that is the point. Number 10. Deathlock Prime. Deathlock Prime hails from the reality of Earth 10511, where in this future the Roxxon Corporation takes over the world. While not a mutant, he is a member of the X-Force who is also seen as a member of the staff for a short time in the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Deathlock Prime is actually a human cyborg in regards to his origin, but this doesn't stop him from lending his expertise and advice to the students of the Jean Grey School. While there, Deathlock Prime gives a guest lecture and even tells some of the kids what their futures might end up being, probably based on his own future. He also warns Wolverine about Evan Sabinur, aka Kid Apocalypse, who later takes the code name of Genesis himself. Deathlock Prime says that Evan could either be a hero or a deadly enemy of the mutants. Number 9. Quicksilver. Okay, so a lot of people in the comments for the part 1 of this list really wanted me to include folks like Franklin Richards, aka Powerhouse, Scarlet Witch, and her brother Quicksilver on that list, or on a potential part 2. Here is the problem with that. While Franklin, Wanda, and Pietro were all once considered mutants and yet are no longer, none of them were technically members of the X-Men team, which is why I couldn't really put any of them on that list. Wanda is first and foremost an Avenger and former X-Men villain, but not really an X-Men member. Franklin is always with the Fantastic Four or Future Foundation, and while he spent some time on Krakoa prior to losing his powers and mutant status, still, once again, not an X-Men. Quicksilver is the closest that we've got, which is why I've included him at the impassioned behest of a good number of you. So Quicksilver is here for you. He's speeding on into the list. Quicksilver was never on the X-Men team, but was a member of one of the X-Factor teams. And while many people forget this fact as it's no longer considered, I guess, the most iconic iteration of the team, the X-Factor team, the original one anyways, was created to actually be a team for the original X-Men to be on when they made their return to the spotlight years later, but the name was already basically taken at that point by a newer team featuring sort of the next era of mutant heroes such as Wolverine, Rogue, and Storm. The version of the X-Factor team that Quicksilver was a part of was also a return to that original team's government-funded roots, which the first X-Factor team was government funded. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show your love for this channel in a different way, you can head on over to Facebook, where you can give us a follow, give us a like, and do all the Facebooky things. Number 8. Elisande Stewart. Elisande Stewart was one of the founding members of the British Who, or at least one of the most important members of that organization, which also stands for the Weird Happenings Organization, I believe. As a result of her work, Elisande would often run into and team up with the Excalibur team. Later on, she ended up also being considered a member of the unofficial Muir Island X-Men team, as she aimed to help defend Muir Island from the Reavers. Elisande Stewart herself is just a normal human lady, not a mutant. She serves in the British Army, where she holds the rank of Brigadier. Or at least, she did hold that rank. She's technically dead now. She was framed by a rival organization and then later killed without much thought by Jamie Braddock while he was using his reality warping powers. as Jamie is wont to do. Number 7. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator, despite not being a mutant, actually attended the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning himself. On part 1 of this list, I talked about his sort of bodyguard turned school staff member Warbird, but I didn't make Q-Bark his own point. So here we go. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Calark, and as such can be extremely powerful due to his physiology and his heritage. However, as a kid, this kind of became a problem. At one point he destroyed half of the Shi'ar royal city Chandalar just because, well, he could. As such, his punishment was to go to Earth and learn how to better control and use his powers at the Jean Grey School, which I feel like he took as a punishment, but maybe Calark was also like, look, you just need to figure it out, okay? Can't just go destroying cities and such. Number 6. Deadpool. Deadpool definitely wasn't a member of the X-Men because they wanted him there. While Deadpool has a long history with the X-Force team, when it comes to the mainstay team of the X-Men, the mutant staple team at Marvel Comics, Deadpool was actually only permitted to be a kinda like an honorary member. I mean, he was given full membership, so technically he's a member. So that the X-Men could keep a closer eye on Wade, basically. Deadpool desperately was searching for his purpose in life and got it in his head that joining the X-Men was the best way for him to be a hero. He ended up leaving the X-Men team after helping them out with a problem that they believed he'd actually caused, but in reality he was kinda just like framed for. Well, I guess in the end, the X-Men kinda like kicked him off the team, but he also was gonna leave anyway. So there. Number 5. Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Kavita Rao is an important ally and friend to mutant kind, who was once a very misguided and powerful enemy. She attempted to cure the legacy virus when it was running rampant, but failed to do so before Beast Hank McCoy did. Later, she was then approached to create a cure for the mutant gene, with the understanding that it would not be used by force, but would simply be given to those that wanted it, people whose powers were basically super dangerous and had potentially even ruined their lives in some cases. Dr. Rao decided to accept the task. She successfully created a serum which turned mutants into humans. The cure was named Hope. After it was revealed that whole plot was about exterminating mutant kind, Dr. Rao submitted to the will of the X-Men. They destroyed her research, with only Hank keeping the last sample of the Hope serum. In the end, her villainous actions later inspired Dr. Rao to set down a path of redemption after the events of M-Day. She joined a team of scientists brought together by Beast to help bring back mutant kind. Dr. Rao would remain working with and alongside the X-Men throughout their Utopia days, and was later a staff member for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 4. Dupe. Despite Dupe being a glorious weirdo, he's never really been confirmed as a mutant. We don't really know what exactly Dupe is. He is either a mutant or some kind of possibly alien or being from another dimension, but the bottom line is it's never been explicitly verified and set in stone what his origin is. And honestly, this is Dupe we're talking about, so I don't think it ever will be. As a result of all that, he's a candidate for this list, despite being maybe one of the weirdest teammates, mutant or no. Dupe has had many adventures with the X-Men and was even the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, joining up with and aiding Wolverine there. He's also been seen on Krakoa since then. It's clear that Dupe feels most at home among mutants, and that is a place where he gets to be, even if he isn't a mutant. Number 3. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton is the adopted sister of mutant and X-Men member Nightcrawler. She is also one of Kurt's major love interests. Yeah, it's complicated. Amanda was actually an alias that she adopted when she went to investigate what her adopted brother Kurt was up to after the death of their brother Steven was kinda pinned on Kurt. Undercover, Jermaine Zardos, which is her real name, became Amanda Sefton, and it was during this time that Kurt would actually fall in love with her, not recognizing, I don't think, that Amanda was his sister Jermaine at the time. At least, I'm pretty sure he didn't recognize that. I'm not sure if she really even changed her appearance, so it's a whole weird thing. Jermaine, or Amanda as we more commonly know her now, is a powerful sorceress, but is not a mutant, and has been an ally to the X-Men, also belonging to their unofficial Muir Island team. Number 2. Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been a longtime friend to the mutants. Although they initially got off on the wrong foot when they first ran into each other in the comics, they eventually realized that they were both on the side of good and ended up becoming friends and allies. Spider-Man in the 90s animated series even goes to the X-Men for help, hoping they can actually cure him, but only to learn that Professor X isn't so much about curing anyone as he is about helping mutants find their place and their way. There is also the matter of the fact that Spider-Man isn't really even that that kind of mutant. He's considered a mutate, having his genetic makeup altered by that radioactive spider bite, and possibly also by his fate to become Spider-Man as a preordained spider totem in the web of life and destiny, which is also a thing. Spider-Man at one point isn't just a member of the team, he actually has his own team of mutants that he himself is responsible for teaching. How cool is that? Special class. Number 1. Longshot. While some might think of Longshot as a mutant, he doesn't consider himself as such. He is believed to be the clone and possibly both the father and son of Shatterstar. Things get weird in the Mojoverse, and Longshot is basically like kind of a paradoxical time loop in and of himself in terms of him and his heritage. As is Shatterstar in some ways, and kind of as is Spiral as well too. Shatterstar himself is a genetically engineered mutant, and Longshot is a clone of him, but despite that tie to sort of mutantdom or mutant kind, albeit a genetically engineered version of mutant kind, he doesn't consider himself to be a mutant. Longshot was instantly liked by the X-Men when they first found him, and ended up joining the team in fighting back against Mojo. Initially, he didn't actually remember who he was or much about himself, and spent a good amount of time on those first adventures with the X-Men team trying to recover his own lost memories.
Kicking off the list at number 10. M. Monet St. Croix made her first appearance in Generation X issue 1 as Penance, and by the time issue 40 rolled around, she was introduced as Monet. She was the second child of Ambassador Cartier St. Croix, who was a wealthy former president of numerous corporations. Now, although she had an older brother and 2 young twin sisters, her father still favored her. Now, her brother Marius had mutant abilities, and when they manifested, he became evil. Sadly, he actually took out his mother and was kicked out of the family, and then he asked Monet to join him, traveling through other dimensions, gaining power. She was like, nope, I'm good, thanks. So she rejected him, and Marius trapped her in this form of a mute creature with diamond-hard red skin. And he fed on her powers. What a not nice guy. It's awful. So Claudia and Nicole, her sisters, the twins, they joined forces. Like, literally. They merged into a new version of Monet. And it was all pretty much the same. Personality, appearance, and powers. M is a telepathic genius, and of course super strength and super speed sure does help her get the job done. Before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It does help our channel quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's go right back into this list. I don't want to waste any more time. Number 9, Frenzy. Okay, Joanna Cargill. She made her first debut in X Factor issue 4. Now, she accidentally punched her father so hard that her hand went through his chestal plate, which is just a great way to find out you have powers. Now, her father was in no means a good person at all, but still, finding out you're a mutant in that way is pretty rough. That's pretty traumatizing for a young kid. So she became known as Frenzy, and she joined the Allegiance of Evil. Now, after the Acolytes disbanded, Joanna became ambassador for Genosha and stood by Magneto until she was captured by the US government in order to learn more about Magneto, but she didn't talk. She was a tough one. She didn't talk until Jean Grey entered and freed her, giving her the option to join the X-Men the easy way or the hard way. Jean used the hard way, and then Frenzy's entire attitude was changed. Her personality was like campy, it was awkward, not nearly as confident as before, but her powers were still there. She did help the X-Men find Magneto's base. She was a team member, even if it was forced and campy. So after Magneto's defeat, her mind control was released and she rejoined the Acolytes and then left the X-Mansion. Super speed, super strength, super stamina, super everything, you name it, she's got it. Her body has been described as being hard as steel, making the She-Hulk put up quite a fight. Number 8, Armor. Hisako Ichiki made her first appearance in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3, Issue 4. Now, she grew up in Japan before joining the Xavier Institute. She formed a close relationship with Wing and Blindfold once she joined Kitty Pryde's Paladin Squad. Now, her new close friends were being attacked one day by Ord of Breakworld, so Armor used her unique mutant abilities to take care of him with a mighty punch. She can create the psionic exoskeleton suit of armor, hence the name Armor. It's fueled by the energy of Hisako's ancestors. In the Ultimate Universe, her abilities create quite the spectacle as well. They appear in the shape of these massive animals, these great beasts, even dragons at some point. As if these abilities weren't surprising and fantastic enough, she also received combat training from Wolverine and tactic training from Cyclops. So she's kind of a big deal. Number 7, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, but Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. He was born after Cyclops and Havoc. Well, not really. He wasn't really born. He was actually surgically removed from his mother's body and placed in an incubator accelerator, then aged to be at his prime, and then sent to Earth to work for Dak and Shikari. One of those normal childhoods, you know? So he escaped and he was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from. Poor kid. So we asked for Charles' help, and then all Kid Vulcan wanted to do was learn about his mutant abilities. Sounds like the perfect student. Like, come on, you're doing all the right things. Charles needed help from him and other newcomers to find the remaining X-Men. So Charles put him in this danger room as a training exercise to get them sharp in a short amount of real time. So it felt like months of training, but in fact it's only a few hours. And then Vulcan and this new team were sent to Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. But Vulcan revealed to Scott that Xavier sacrificed his own brother to save him. Number 6, Maggot. That's a fun name right off the bat. Maggot? Maggot, or I mean Japheth, first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 345. He was born with 5 siblings but never grew at the same rate as them. And on top of that, he had struggled with pains in his stomach. Sadly, those pains turned out to maybe be cancer, and he feared that he would run his family dry with medical bills. So at just age 12, he left the South African village and started to think of a dark solution to his problem. Super tragic. So he ended up in the Kalahari Desert and was found by Magneto, who figured out that these stomach issues were actually these 2 slug-like creatures that lived in the boy's body, and they acted as his digestive system. Years later, Maggot reached out to Magneto in hopes that he would help him with this gross situation. Now the slugs, named Eenie and Meanie, because that's what you do when you have slugs, you give them cute nicknames, they were these sentient techno-organic slugs that could devour anything. Doesn't matter what kind of matter you are, gone, devoured. They would do it fast too, not at the pace of normal slugs. And once lunchtime was finished, they would return back to Japheth's stomach, transferring the energy from what they just consumed, granting him super strength and durability. Also, he had a nice avatar tan to go along with these magnificent abilities. Number 5, Kid Omega. Now again, the word kid is used lightly in this list. You do not want to underestimate Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega. He made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths next to Jean Grey. So off the bat, you know you're in for a treat. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils. That is until, of course, he put together the Omega Gang, which was this gang that would handle humans after they've committed crimes against mutants. They would do it themselves, not in a poetic way, to say the least. They were like the super kid police. They even went to a tattoo shop and made it official. They got these Omega symbols tattooed over top of the X. Now his abilities are insane. He can manipulate your perception, judgment, wills, and common sense. He's able to track you down by listening to your thoughts, folks. Your thoughts, you can hear your thoughts. And even in this instance, if you were a telepath, you wouldn't see him coming because he would block out your powers to sneak up on you. One of the coolest things about Quentin is the psionic shotgun that he can create. It just looks cool. He just channels all this mental energy as this astral energy shotgun. And if that doesn't do the trick, the psionic rocket launcher should. Number 4, Kubark, aka Kid Gladiator, another kid. Kubark is the son of Emperor Gladiator. He was this young prince sent to Earth to train and discover more secrets about his powers. And the one place you go and do that is, of course, the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. Warbird was his bodyguard, and the reason that he was sent to Earth, this new kid on the block, was because he destroyed more than half of the Shi'ar royal city on Chandalar. Just for fun, you know? In Wolverine and the X-Men, he arrives and starts giving orders to other students, like to bring him snacks, the whole thing. And he wanted these students to call him their new Imperial Overlord. He's jam-packed with superpowers though. He can possess the ability to fly, and his eyes are pretty interesting, not just to look at. He has microscopic vision and can blast heat beams through those peepers. And with an incredible lung capacity, he can take in large amounts of air and blast it out, creating these hurricane-like winds. And if that doesn't work, he can use his breath to freeze you dead in your tracks. Number 3, Lifeguard, aka Heather Cameron. Lifeguard is such a cool character. Okay, let's talk about her. She's super unique. She made her first debut in Extreme X-Men issue 6. And judging by her name, yes, she of course started off as a lifeguard and also as a surfer. Her mutant ability is that of a lifeguard. Literally, her powers allow her to manifest whatever is needed to save the life of somebody near her. If you're allergic to peanuts, bam, EpiPen, stab, we're good. She's like the super medic of the X-Men. She's awesome. After the events of M-Day, Heather was one of the lucky to retain her abilities. She's almost a combination of Darwin and Mystique. Now, I talked about Darwin in part 1 of this list, so if you want a little bit of catching up to do, you know where to find that. Number 2, Zeitgeist. Axel Clooney. He was seen in Deadpool 2, and he made his first comic book appearance in X-Force issue 116. His ability, let's just talk about it. He can spit acid, like a lot of acid. So much acid. It can eat through any substance, and I think what makes this character even more wild is when he himself discovered these powers for the first time. Oh boy, okay. He was at the beach hanging out. He met this lovely woman. They clicked. It was romantic. They were nice. They were kissing on the beach. And then all of a sudden, this happens. A lot of acid puke. A lot of puke, real nasty stuff. Ugh. But this guy is super powerful. Like, he can take on so many mutants. I mean, it's gross, but if only he didn't spew it out of his mouth, maybe he had fingers that could do the acid shooting, he would be less of a gag. Pun intended. And finally, coming in at number 1, Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant power of generating these dazzling sparkles from her hands. She was always seen as this little sister type character from the start, but she packs a powerful, pretty punch. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall, and when she followed the women back through a portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and they were a fun duo. Now her powers grew to a whole new level when a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square. This happens in Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire. It was a pretty big deal. Even before the vampire stuff, this is a highly underrated character to this day. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Mimic. Calvin Rankin came into comics in X-Men 19. He was the son of a scientist, and when he was just a child, he knocked over a beaker filled with this experimental chemicals, okay? Now this red gas emerged and he inhaled it, so now he has this amazing ability where he can mimic anybody else's powers. They just have to be standing close by. Now the team at first is trying to take him down, but they're failing, of course, as he's just adapting to their every move. So while this ability does sound like one of the best, it kind of just depends on who's near you. I mean, he's not too powerful, but he is, if you're the one that's powerful that's near him. See what I mean? So if you're hanging out with Mimic, he may just seem pretty normal. That's because, well, shocker, you're just pretty normal. You can't fly, you can't shoot lasers out of your eyes. But if Cyclops came along, all of a sudden, this guy is totally different. You're still a boring human. Now he's another Cyclops. How unfair is that? And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does wonders for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's get right back into these crazy mutants. Number 9, not another teen mutant. Okay, this next one is a one-off, okay? He doesn't have a name exactly, so we'll just refer to him as Teen Mutant from now on. Not a Teen Mutant Ninja Turtle, just a Teen Mutant. Well, you'll see, it's kind of crazy. At first, he looks like a regular kid. He's got posters on his wall, one of which is Wolverine with the caption, "Be different," right below it, but we'll talk about that a little later, because he may have taken that a little too literally. So he wakes up, he's ready for school, he's looking for breakfast. His mom is nowhere to be seen, only a pile of her clothes remain on the ground. So he doesn't call the police, but rather he just writes a note, sticks it, and then goes to school. If you ever wake up and there's just clothes left, call the police no matter what. That comes first. On the way to school, he sees there's just a collar lying on the sidewalk. Just a collar, no animal. Okay, odd. What's going on? Finally, he sees people. He's like, okay, great. I'm not going crazy. Whew, that was a close one. But I bet that he wished that that was the case after what's about to happen. So he has this neat ability where people just don't survive being close to him. They kind of explode. It's pretty gross. And he hears it from the guy in that poster himself. He hears it from Wolverine when he finds him ducking out in a cave. So what happened was when he hit puberty, he developed a specific mutation that radiates a series of toxins and acid-like poisons. So it wipes out any organic tissue in its way. It turns it into vapor. So the number of people that he ended up taking out that day was a whopping 265. And you thought he was just another blonde-haired teen heartthrob. Think again. Number 8, El Guapo. This next one, I don't think I would even notice this mutant if he was standing right in front of my very eyes. Meet Robbie Rodriguez. He was the stuntman for X-Statix the movie. Now he saved the team from Sharon Ginsburg. She attacked because she blamed X-Statix for the amputation of her wings. So in comes Robbie Rodriguez with his sentient skateboard to save the day. That's right, sentient skateboard, you heard me. He has no real powers himself, but he has this symbiotic skateboard that acts along with his mental commands, even subconscious thoughts sometimes. So the skateboard once beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. So next time you see a dude at the skate park, just double check and see if it's Robbie Rodriguez, because you never know. Number 7, Anarchist. Tyke Alucard made his first appearance in X-Force issue 116. The same issue that had Zeitgeist origins as well, actually, which is in part 2. If you haven't already seen it, I talk about him. He's the guy who pukes acid. Gross. But we also meet Tyke Alucard in this. So he said he doesn't want to go and give away all his secrets, but he's got something going on with his sweat. It's like acid. He can secrete acid from the pores of his body, and if there's enough of it, say that when he's fighting bad guys, it becomes this form of energy that he's able to blast out. He would blast these acid blasts. Like, how insane is that? The guy makes acid brass knuckles. Brassed knuckles. He was a new addition to the team to replace Sluck, but they weren't a fan of him at first. They thought he was a risk, not a team player, high maintenance, and mentally unstable. Although he pulled through for the team at the end of the day. Number 6, Cypher. Douglas Ramsey came around with comics with New Mutants issue 13. Now he believes that language is power. And when we first meet him, he's a smart dude in a vest. He's got nice hair. He's talking about deciphering codes. We wouldn't expect too much from him. Maybe he's their guy in the chair. Other chair. Now Douglas is actually quite powerful. His ability allows him to communicate with any species. Written or spoken language doesn't make a difference. Doug's got your back, whatever language that is. He can also extend this ability to decipher codes and complex equations, leaving him a pretty powerful asset to any team. Number 5, Eyeboy. Trevor Hawkins, again, one of those mutants where you can probably guess his mutation just on his name alone. Eyeboy is, yes, covered in eyes. 57 of them, to be exact. He made his first appearance in Wolverine and the X-Men issue 19. He was one of the new mutants that manifested their power after the Avengers vs. X-Men war. Then he enrolled in the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. So Eyeboy, okay, big deal. You walk up, you poke all of his eyes out, problem solved. We've played Zelda before, we know how to defeat this guy. Wrong. He is more than meets the eyes. Trevor can of course see you coming, and though his eyes can't shoot laser beams, they do have a plethora of unique abilities. I'm talking microscopic vision, telescopic vision, X-ray vision, night vision, infrared, thermal, chemical detection, you name it, he can see it. All these eyes will see you in any sense. He can even pick up on your body language quite well. Number 4, Nature Girl. Lynn Lee made her debut in Wolverine and the X-Men Volume 2, Issue 1. And at first she seems like a regular student, just maybe with antlers. Okay. So Nature Girl can control and bond with animals, which sounds pretty peaceful if anything. Like if I could control animals, I'd spend all my time in the woods. I'd just take a flute and I'd have a great time. Maybe even pack a lunch. It'd be lovely. With her powers, she can of course do that, but also go further. She can connect to the natural world and control all of nature. Living beings, plants, weather, the very geology of the earth. Whatever the case is, she can control it. She can talk to plant lives as well. So if there's any plants that need some watering in your apartment, she'll let you know. And if Nature Girl needs to make a quick escape and there were no birds around to control, she herself can fly only for a limited time. Number 3, Gold Balls. Fabio Medina made his comic book debut in X-Men Volume 3, but it wasn't until issue 11 that we got to meet Gold Balls. His powers came to be after somebody tried to rob him, then all of a sudden he started to generate these spheres, these gold balls, out of every part of his body. And whenever these bouncy gold balls hit something, they would make a boink sound, which ought to be pretty annoying just as it is. So these gold balls were not made of gold, rather they were produced from infertile eggs. He's pretty outstanding as it is, but currently in the comics, he's referred to as Egg, which is more appropriate after he learned the true nature of his abilities. So Egg and these other members of the Five are tasked with resurrecting any mutants that have met their terrible fate. So eggs are a major key to this process. So he's not just all about, being gold and having balls and stuff. Number 2, Tag. Brian Cruz made his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 10. He was actually reborn thanks to that group of 5 that I just mentioned with gold balls. So Brian's powers are pretty amazing. I can see how one wouldn't expect him to be as powerful as he is. So he has what's called the pariah effect. So if he tags you, hence his name Tag, when he tags you, you become it. Then he uses this form of telepathy to make you emit this signal that causes everybody else to run away from you, just to leave your vicinity. Or they can run towards you, which is even scarier. And he can decide on that number of people affected as well. It could be one person chasing you, or it could be 200, depends how many are near you. This effect stops after the victim reaches 100 feet, but still, that many people in that radius all running towards you, like what if it was Black Friday? It would be an absolute nightmare. Also, these people that are chasing you are fully aware of what's happening, they just can't control it, so if that's not a nightmare, I don't know what is. And finally, number 1, we have Summoner. Making his first appearance in X-Men Volume 5, Issue 2, the Summoner. The Summoner at first just looks like a mutant child. It's referring to its mother, so off the bat you assume, okay, young. He's the son of Bracken and Apocalypse's first horseman of war. He was born 300 years ago on Araco, the highest ranking out of all the other summoners. They were these wizards that can summon creatures of Araco. Now his grandmother was taken out by the dark god of Amenth, Annihilation. So that's when the Amenthi Daemons destroyed Araco's towers and then attacked and wiped out all those mutants. Now the Summoner is not just a pale child, he can summon a horde of elementals as well. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first comic book appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four, Issue 4, and right off the bat, he seems very soft-spoken, he seems very gentle. I mean, the Thing is yelling at him and he's literally like, "Why do you reject me? Why?" Like, he's so almost poetic in a way. And then when the Thing goes to clobber him, bam, there's multiple more men. Now, he wasn't used very much in the X-Men, but he spent most of his days with X-Factor. But this guy is underrated. His powers may seem kind of weak compared to somebody like Jean Grey, but these duplicates can each make a duplicate. At one point, this guy had 40 of him running around town. 40! Now, the duplicates think, they feel, and they act independently, but they're guided by the original James Madrox. In a way, they're guided. They kind of know what to do. Each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer the time away, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense that the general area where the body is, which is like the saddest radar ever. This guy could take over the world if he wanted. It would be like that scene from The Matrix, but with more monologues probably. And before we go on to this list of X-Men you probably wouldn't expect to be that powerful, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, just right there, just give it a little tap tap, and it helps our studio out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the list. Lickety split. Number 9, Darwin. We saw this next mutant for a hot minute in X-Men First Class. He was played by Eddie Gathegi, who unfortunately didn't survive too long. See, he threw his life down on the line in order to protect his fellow X-Men. And this was still in the early days too. What a champ. He first showed up in the comics in 2005 with X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2. Armando Munoz looked a lot different than we saw on screen as well. Since he was 4 years old, he was bald, his arms were super long, and his eyes were changing. He sure looks a little bit different than the young, handsome actor that we saw in the movie. His ability comes in handy a lot actually, more so in the X-Men movies. See, in the comics, he's practically immortal. His ability once allowed him to survive Hela's death touch. I mean, it's a little bit different than the last time we saw him, that's for sure. Number 8, Caliban. An albino mutant and former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. So he has the ability to track down any mutant. He actually sacrifices himself in the movie Logan, where Stephen Merchant played him. He was also in X-Men Apocalypse for a bit too, played by a different actor. He was played by Tomas Lamarcus. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, but once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of the Mutants. So he's pretty powerful, and he's done a lot of cool stuff too. He may seem like a gentle, lanky, pale man, but when Caliban is stressed out in the comics, he gains 2 additional powers: super strength and fear absorption. So if you put him in a corner, he'll be able to absorb the psionic energy in your fear and use it to power himself up even more. Number 7, Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, although Glob is much more fun to say. He made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants, so already he's off to a pretty rocky start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not on board, so his mother drove Glob out to Westchester and just left him for Professor X. Like you leave a baby at a fire station. It's just like, yep, here you go, your problem now. This mutation was interesting. So his skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is pretty amazing off the bat. You can light him on fire and he's good to go. That's amazing. He runs with the New Mutants now, and although his name is silly and he's literally a glob, he can also possess powers of super strength and super speed, despite how he may look. So he can get hit by these massive bombs like it's nothing, then he can fight whoever launched that bomb with ease. The X-Men literally once used him as a heat shield once. They strapped Glob to the front of their ship, and it didn't seem pleasant for a man Glob, but he was good. He didn't die or anything. He had to rest for a bit. Number 6, Toad. When you think of the name Toad in relation to a superhero, you're gonna picture something pretty silly in your head. And Mortimer Toneby isn't that far off from what you'd think. He made his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 4. So he hops around, which seems silly, but his legs are so strong that he can leg press 3 tons. And it's not just his legs that are strong, his upper half possesses superhuman strength as well. His arms can lift about 1 ton. He also has flexible bone structure, regenerative healing factor, infrared vision, and the best part, his 30-foot long tongue can also act as a whip. And it can secrete venom that can give him mind control over your body, and his saliva is acid as well. Number 5, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Kevin Ford grew up thinking that he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person ever, one or the two. See, his mutant power started manifesting, and then he noticed it first in his plants, and then he noticed it in his clothes, and then he noticed it in people. So what would happen is his plants would wither. They would wither and they would die. And then his clothes were starting to decay as well. So once his father figures out this mutation, he tries to calm him down, but coming into contact with him, obviously the inevitable happens. He sees the world in this lifeless or decaying way now. See, it's part of this mutation. He can disintegrate all forms of organic matter just by one touch. Whatever he touches withers, so now we get his name. It turns into dust within seconds, whatever it is. Now this seems boring, I guess. When you think of it in like a cinematic battle, it's not too exciting. But this guy can take out an entire elite squad just by touching them. I mean, realistically, just send him in always. No one's gonna expect it. All you have to do is get him to fist bump everybody and then bam, just like that. No more bad guys. Number 4, Nocturne. This next one, she comes from Earth 2182, where she's the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Now, she's got her dad's looks, unfortunately. She's blue, furry, she's got 3 fingers and 3 toes. She's got a tail and yellow eyes and pointed ears. Now, sure, she looks like she can take out any bad guy, like she looks like an alien. So she possesses the powers of both of her parents. She can blast off energy bolts, she can climb walls, but what makes her even more powerful is that she has the ability to possess others for 12 hours, or 1 lunar cycle. But once that timer is up, the victim is just completely out of it for 24 hours, just comatose. This super offspring packs a super punch, that's for sure. Number 3, Tattoo. Christine Cord made her comic book debut in the new X-Men issue 126. She was a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin, and she can phase through matter, which is also kind of fun. She's pretty awesome. I mean, when you first think of her, you may just think of the skin messages and be like, oh, whatever, maybe she's a spy, maybe she can be like, send help and then use her skin. Cool, that's good. But check this out. Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head once and told him that if she becomes solid, he would not survive to see the end of it. How awesome is that? But she sadly lost her powers during the events of M-Day, but if you ever ran into Christine again, she would probably surprise you with her new ability. When she was released from jail, she joined the New Warriors and was given her own Stiltman armor, becoming Longstrike. So bam, 2 in 1. Talk about underrated. Number 2, Banshee. The Screaming Banshee. Okay, he made his first appearance in X-Men issue 28. Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep, Ireland. Now, Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. Now, he went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but he sadly lost his life during Deadly Genesis when he was trying to stop Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. So when you think of an X-Men who screams so loud he can hurt people, it's impressive on its own, sure, but his screams are actually stronger than we really think. His screams can actually break through an inch of steel. And with these wings that Professor X developed for him, he's able to harness his power and use his screams as energy to help him fly. So he can do so much more with his voice as well. He can tighten the sound waves around himself to make a sonic shield, and he can influence your subconscious by changing the tones and vibrations of his voice. He can literally change your mind. How awesome is that? What do you mean you want a divorce? And finally, number 1, we have my favorite on the list, Bailey Hoskins. Okay, I have to talk about this poor kid. Okay, strongest X-Men you wouldn't expect? Yeah, that is for sure Bailey Hoskins. The only appearance of this kid is in the 2016 miniseries X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever, which is a pretty cruel name. He was a student at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and his power is pretty spectacular. He can self-detonate, he can make himself explode, and you would never expect it just by looking at him. I mean, come on. He reminds me of Hogarth from the Iron Giant. He's such a cute kid. The thing is, he can only use this fantastic ability once. And his last issue in the comics was X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, issue 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Top 10 Nerd. I have been your host, Taylor McWaters. Look, drop us a comment down below. Which of these underrated X-Men is your favorite? Because we love to check them out as well. Like Bailey Hoskins, that could be a Disney Plus original right there. It would only be 5 episodes, that's for sure.
At number 10, we have Maggot. This guy gives me the creeps, and for good reason. He basically has 2 carnivorous worms on either one of his shoulders that devour anything on command. And they don't do it just as an offensive attack, but so that they can harvest the energy of the target and return it to Maggot's stomach, offering him a temporary boost of strength and durability. Honestly, this guy could come off as cool in some weird way to some people, but to me, his powers are just too gross and too much of a hassle to even be worth it. Most superheroes just have super strength and durability as a base set of powers, and Maggot, well, he has to get his worms to eat someone just to get those basic abilities, and only temporarily too. The weirdness factor for this mutant comes from his look, but also from the strange lengths he has to go to just to get on an even keel of power to most of his peers.
Number 9. Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not basically has the power of me in high school. His abilities allow him to basically be unnoticeable, so much so that he had been on the X-Men roster for 6 years and no one remembered it. As an X-Men, he battled the Brood and fought in the Age of X story, and has honestly saved their behinds on more than one occasion before he actually first appeared in X-Men Legacy number 300 in March of 2014. He is literally both real and not real at the same time, which is a concept I am just too dumb to properly explain. He played a key role in X-Force Volume 4 number 10 in 2014 when the X-Men tried to get him to help with one of the key conflicts being, quote unquote, how can they hope to find a mutant who slips out of memory whenever he leaves their sight? Only problem is, he can't control his powers at all. So how do we prove he even exists? I mean, other than him actually being legitimately written in the comics, his actions and use of things can be perceived, like his use of toilet paper, allowing people to logically conclude that he could exist. Also, his powers were shown to leave distortions on camera records. I don't know how cameras forget him, but it's a comic book, so give me a break. A few mutants could detect him, like Phantom X, who said Forget-Me-Not was overweight, which is kind of rude.
At number 8, we have Skin. First off, the name. It's like a writer coined this name at 4 AM after forgetting they had a deadline the next morning. And the powers are equally bizarre. He's basically able to stretch his skin by about 4 to 6 feet and use it to swing around or tie up bad guys. He's like Mr. Fantastic, except it's only his skin, so I imagine it's like a little less durable and he probably can't pull the guys in as strong as if they were actually his limbs. And in my opinion, the worst of it is that when Skin is just hanging out and not actively holding in his skin, it just hangs off of him at its longest length, with his skeleton staying the same size, which is kind of gross. It's like a beanbag chair but without any filling, and instead of styrofoam beads, it's a full-on skeleton and organs. He's also a nightmarish pale blue-gray, which, I don't know, they could have at least made him look healthy, you know? Anyway, Skin at number 8.
Number 7, Eye-Boy. Not the first or last mutant to be called the lamest mutant ever, Trevor Hawkins developed his mutant ability after the Avengers vs. X-Men war in Wolverine and the X-Men number 19 in 2012. And, well, his mutation is that Trevor is covered from head to toe in dozens of eyes. It's creepy, it's weird, it's actually more useful than you might think. Microscopic, telescopic, X-ray, night, infrared, and thermal vision are all things he is capable of. He can also detect chemicals, is an excellent marksman, and is skilled in nonverbal communication. He can basically read other people's behaviors and body language to almost read their minds, predict attacks, and read people's histories. All Sherlock Holmes-like. He can pinpoint weak spots in machines and people, is able to see past illusions and disguises, but to top it all off, the craziest and newest addition to his powers is solar blasts, meaning Trevor can emit intense bursts of bright yellow energy and focused beams of extrastellar force that cause sunburns and radiation poisoning. So yeah, Eye-Boy looks really weird, sure, but he'll tell you your deepest insecurities and then blast you with radiation, so there's that.
At number 6 is Choir. Choir, aka Arena Clayton, wasn't ever part of the X-Men, but studied at the School for Gifted Children, which I'm gonna count, for the simple reason that I wanted to talk about her. First appearing in the new X-Men issue number 119, Choir just has mouths all over her body, and the function for it is very unclear. In some cases, she's able to confuse her enemies by shouting things in all directions, but that's about it as far as I can tell. And I'm honestly not leaving anything out, that's really it. It's unfortunate because in these cases, the use of the word mutant becomes that much more accurate. Like, Choir is one of those X-Men that I feel badly for. Superpowers are supposed to be cool and make us wish that we could have them too, but this one is just, it's like a curse, you know what I mean? But honestly, that sort of goes for everyone on this list, and at least Choir seems like a competent and friendly person. So don't get me wrong, she could still have potential. Power doesn't always come from brute force, you know, it can also be achieved by becoming a good strategist or tactician, which she'll have plenty of mouths to yell orders at people, I'm sure. At least.
Number 5. Fabio Medina. Although he had thought himself and his powers ridiculous, which they kind of are, if we're being honest, Fabio Medina and his battle cry, "Gold balls!" is kind of awesome actually. Fabio can produce golden balls of different sizes that shoot out from any part of his body. and make the sound poink each time they hit something. The golden balls he fires actually seem to bounce. Now, ask me why this is a useful genetic mutation. Go ahead, ask away. But prepare yourself because he gets more weird. After he moved to Krakoa with other mutants, it was discovered that Goldball's balls are actually infertile eggs. And if these eggs are made fertile, it could allow for unlimited resurrection of the mutant race. Yes. So, the golden balls he was firing out of his body at sentinels and antagonists were actually infertile bouncy golden eggs. I don't like this. But he did become a member of the Five that combined their powers to resurrect deceased mutants, and that was pretty cool.
At number 4 is Beak. Beak, or Barnell Bowhusk, is a creation of Grant Morrison, first appearing in his new X-Men series, and he is basically a bird person, but in a more literal sense than any of us asked for. He's got hollow bones, feathers, and a beak, and he can't even fly really. He can just glide briefly, which in my opinion it's not worth the hassle of the rest of what he's got going on. He does have talons and long range vision, so there's some kind of offensive potential there. And apparently he's really nice too, which I guess makes up for the fear he strikes in the hearts of many. I like to imagine that Beak was created accidentally when Grant Morrison pitched a character that was half bird, half human, thinking he was on the phone with his character designer, but he'd actually called David Cronenberg instead. Poor Barnell Bowhusk. I feel badly for him, honestly. Even his real name, Barnell Bowhusk? Anyway.
Number 3. Dupe. If you have not heard of Dupe, well then allow me to enlighten you. This weird looking bumpy green bean thing will put his hand on your chest. The product of a Cold War US military experiment instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union. Somehow, Dupe is unable to learn English, and as such he speaks in a language all of his own that everyone somehow can eventually understand. Although Captain America says the US government created him in a secret weapons project, he is also apparently from a place called Marginalia. It's surprising that he is a member of the X-Men considering he isn't technically a mutant. As far as I know, at least. But the most surprising thing is his list of powers. He has possible omniscience, he's strong and durable enough to do battle with and defeat Thor, he can heal from super serious wounds in seconds and resurrect himself, he is crazy fast, he has size alteration, energy projection, psionic abilities, he can perform dupish magic, and has the power of the funk. And last but not least, Dupe's body contains a nightmare dimension known as Dupe Land that he can trap people in and summon monsters from. And if you want to count it, he even has the power of looking like a really angry mix between a lima bean and a pickle. So there's that.
At number 2 is Ugly John. He's not technically part of the X-Men, okay? But he's a mutant who's been on their side for his whole run in the comics. And honestly, I just wanted to include the weirdest Marvel character I've ever heard of. He's got 3 faces. And that's it. He doesn't last for long, first appearing in New X-Men issue number 114 when he's saved by Wolverine and Cyclops from a Sentinel who captures him. After being saved from captivity, he's then probably captured again by the Wild Sentinels and is critically injured in this incident. I don't know why Ugly John is such an asset to the Sentinels, but I imagine it really tested the whole no man left behind philosophy for the X-Men. He really puts the other X-Men in some serious danger as they save him for a second time, this time with his life threatened by injury. And unfortunately for Ugly John, he's so badly injured that Cyclops actually puts him out of his misery. I know. It's very dark, but don't blame me, blame Grant Morrison. I just wish the world had at least given this 3-faced mutant a break by allowing him a nicer name.
Number 1. Bailey Hoskins. How does this normal looking ginger wind up as the number 1 spot on our list? Bailey Hoskins from Earth TRN 656, otherwise known as Exceptional, was from the non-ironically titled X-Men Worst X-Men Ever 5-issue story from 2016. Now what are his powers? Bailey has the greatest power of self-detonation. He can blow up! Just once. And then he moves on to the eternal plane of death. So how do we find out about his mutant ability if he can't really use it? Well, his parents are both mutants. His mother has X-ray vision and his dad can quote-unquote fry an egg on his chest if he wanted to. Cool. They visit the Xavier Institute where Beast breaks this poor potential X-Man's young heart by letting him know his utterly depressing power. Not too long after that, when deciding to walk away from the school for mutants, his parents, the only thing he says he has left, gets stepped on by a sentinel. He joins the school and basically fails at everything he tries to do, using a mech armor, being an intern, joining the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and the world eventually becomes an apocalypse ruled by a fellow mutant, Riches. In the end, fueled by the fact that he has been a failure his entire life, Bailey finally uses his power to bring down Riches and finally do something actually exceptional. Good job. At number 10 is Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a mutant from the far-flung dystopian possible future where Hope Summers wiped out millions of human beings, resulting in the hunting and policing of mutants by sentinels under control of the government. From just this alone, his knowledge of possible future events, he has a large amount to offer. But Lucas Bishop also served as a member of the XSE mutant police force, giving him a whole whack of experience using his abilities. Speaking of which, Bishop has the very useful mutant ability of energy absorption, allowing him to absorb the majority of types of energy, including magic, sound, light, psionic, psychic, and the list goes on, with no clearly defined limit as of yet. The energies he absorbs can be either environmental or directed towards him as attacks. He can then store or project that energy from his body in different ways, whether in the form of concussive blasts, energy rays, explosions, fire, plasma, and again the list goes on. But his favorite use is by projecting the energy out of his XSE weaponry. The nature of his powers makes it difficult to damage him with energy based attacks, and almost any attack to be honest, giving him nigh invulnerability. But it also enables him to work well with any energy using teammates. Bishop can also store the absorbed energy within his personal reserves, whereupon the energy increases his strength, speed, stamina, and healing abilities. He is highly underutilized, especially recently, and I think that's gotta change. Alright, at number 9 is Polaris. Lorna Dane is not just a green Scarlet Witch, okay? In fact, she is the real, legit daughter of the anti-hero magnetic powerhouse Magneto. She's been manipulated, used, and been the victim of villains like Mesmero, Eric the Red, the Marauders, Zaladane, and Apocalypse. But she has been a member of the X-Men and more recently is a key member of the newest version of the team. She's always been prominent, but I think a little overlooked in comparison to others, which is a shame. She's actually quite powerful. As the daughter of Magneto, Polaris actually has pretty much exactly the same abilities as him. She can control and manipulate magnetic fields, allowing her to create force fields, fly on the Earth's magnetic field, emit magnetic concussive pulses that can overload and short-circuit electrical systems. She's able to manipulate the natural iron within the blood of living organisms, allowing her to reverse the flow of an entire crowd's blood in order to render them unconscious. She controls metal and magnetism just like her father, but hasn't had as much experience, so her potential has not been fully realized as of yet. Number 8. Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time. But for some reason, he always seems kind of unused, at least to me. He is almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. He can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing, for example. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technological device in his visual range. It's a skill that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology to create countermeasures for it. It's pretty cool. It's almost hard to explain how this is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just do it, and then deconstruct it later to figure out how it actually works. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take into account his magical affinity. And at number 7 is Dazzler. Dazzler, otherwise known as Alison Blair, is a mutant with the ability to transduce sound into light. She's also a very gifted singer and performer, which she uses in tandem with her powers to just blow people's minds at her concerts. But she is more than that. She can take any source of sound other than her own voice, voice, unless it's projected back at her, as light energy which she stores up and can use in a bunch of really cool ways. Obviously, using the lights she emits, she can blind adversaries, but she can also create therapeutic light to help allies. Her Dazzle Blast, which is either the worst name ever or the best name ever, is a light show so intense it overwhelms the nervous system of whoever is watching and can knock people out. She can also shoot lasers that can cut through solid metal and photon blasts that strike with concussive force. She can create quote-unquote light fog to hide allies. She can create force fields for offensive and defensive purposes, and she can even fly. She's become the Herald of Galactus in a What If comic, and she was actually one of the more impressive versions of Thor from God Doom's Thor Corps, even coming over to the 616 reality at one point. Dazzler is awesome and very underused. Coming in at number 6 is Mimic. As a child, a nosy and curious Calvin Rankin accidentally exposed himself to one of his father's experiments. Altering his body and triggering his powers, Calvin soon discovered he was able to mimic the abilities of others who were in his close proximity. He first appeared as an adversary to the original X-Men, copying and mimicking all their powers at once. After he reformed, he was offered a role on the team. Now, as a member of the X-Men, Mimic didn't really get along too well with his fellow teammates, but he was one hell of a powerful asset to them and was responsible for a few of the team's victories. Cyclops resigned as leader shortly after Calvin joined, and weirdly, Professor X chose to make Mimic the team's leader. Over time, other powers he has copied include the powers of Hulk, Banshee, Marrow, Gambit, Rogue, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Pharaon, Megan, Kylan, Micromax, Rachel Summers, Wolfsbane, Pete Wisdom, Psylocke, Risque, Siren, Warpath, Sunspot, Cable, Caliban, Domino, Boom Boom, Richter, Cannonball, Shatterstar, Post, Blob, Mystique, Toad, members of the Crazy Gang, and so many others. The thing about Mimic in comparison to Sync or Rogue is that he copies skills and abilities as well as powers, and even mimics physical attributes, which gives him a degree of more versatility at the cost of lower power levels. But he's still really cool. Number 5, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy interesting power. Okay, so I should say for starters that he isn't technically a mutant. Jamie or James Madrox is actually a changeling, which is a sort of genetic precursor for mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on, like in puberty or whatever. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe. One of the real benefits of his power though is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book, if that makes sense. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse. He can also use the ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, one claimed to be the world's greatest detective, and just stuff like that. In his self-titled comic from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Madri, which is the plural for Jamie's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, it would just be so entertaining. And at number 4, Blink. Do you know in the beginning of the X-Men Days of Future Past live action movie when there's that really cool fight scene in the bunker between some mutants and the ultra advanced Sentinels? Now you know that mutant that was firing out portals and stuff and doing all that jazz? That is Blink, and she is so cool. Clarice Ferguson's power has a few different uses. Obviously there are the bright pink portals, but she can also throw that same energy as a sort of missile that will teleport those, or even parts of those, that she hits. The range of her power is actually quite impressive, as it has a potential range of as far as the moon and back, which is pretty freaking far, if you know. With the potential of her abilities and the cool way it is used, and even just how awesome it looks, you'd think she would have done a lot more, but she seems to not really have a whole lot of meaningful appearances. Except, if you want to see her being as amazing of a character as she should be, find her in Age of Apocalypse. So cool. Number 3, Firestar. Another pretty powerful mutant who just hasn't had any key moments to speak of. Angelica Jones, also known as Firestar, has the awesome mutant ability of microwave energy manipulation and generation. She uses the Earth's electromagnetic field and converts it into microwave radiation. She also absorbs microwave radiation from her environment and from stars in the galaxy. She can then focus this energy at targets or to do different things. She can set targets on fire, explode them, and even melt them. She is consistently keeping her powers in check because she has the potential to damage the entire Earth and its atmosphere with her abilities, which is why she is even more powerful in space, where she isn't limited by the fragility of the Earth. Out in the cosmos, she has been able to easily produce an attack that injured Garthon Saul when he possessed the energy of the entire Nova Corps. And she also used her abilities to power a massive Shi'ar interstellar transport gate with very, very little effort. She's even been able to disrupt the psionic powers of others using her own power. Most impressively, Emma Frost. She is still young and learning to use her powers, but she needs to be more than just one of Spider-Man's friends because she is a powerhouse of potential. And at number 2 is Husk. Paige Guthrie is part of a family that has a lineage of mutant abilities. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Joshua Guthrie, Icarus, Melody Guthrie, Arrow, and Jebediah Guthrie, who doesn't have a superhero name. Paige's power is a wee bit unorthodox though. She has the ability to shed her skin, and by concentrating on specific chemicals or elemental formulas, she can cause the layer of skin underneath to be a different element or shape or state. She can become any solid that she has studied and can imitate metal, diamond, granite, wood, rubber, and even glass. She's been shown to turn into a sharp-toothed lizard once, which is weird. She doesn't have perfect control over her abilities at this point in time, but when she transforms, she obviously gains different abilities depending on what she turns into. She's granted herself super strength and durability, flame generation, and many other different things. Her shedding lets her get rid of dirt or sweat and even minor injuries, which is both cool and kind of a little freaky, but she has all kinds of potential if she is given the time to properly train her powers. And in at number 1, Megan or Megan or Megan or however you want to say it. If you were a fan of Excalibur in the late 80s and early 90s, then you'll likely know who Megan is. That's with 2 G's. Megan is a unique character like most of the mutants are. She's a mutant empath with the ability to shapeshift, but she is also an elemental of great power, and she's even got a dose of fairy heritage. Her list of abilities is a little hard to define, as it is with most shapeshifters, and it can even be augmented by her connection with the Earth. She is transformed into a Godzilla-like dragon that could breathe fire, and even a werewolf-like creature with all the enhancements that can afford. Megan has also shown through her environmental connection and mutant empath abilities to be able to adapt to situations and also to the emotions of those around her. So for example, she can grow gills and fur, or become prettier when those around her think she is ugly. She can also turn into other superhumans as well, gaining their powers but with less potential, which even worked when she became a female version of the Silver Surfer, which is kind of nuts. She is resistant to reality warping powers, and she even has a true form where she can manipulate elements, fly, and manipulate magical energies. She is a highly capable mutant and character. She just hasn't really done a heck of a lot since the 90s, and that's a shame. Coming in at number 10, it's Toad. Toad has been a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and by extension, a part of the mutant community for a hot minute. But in my opinion, Mortimer Toynbee hasn't really been utilized as much as he should be given his massive list of abilities. Toad has a degree of superhuman strength, specifically in his back and legs, which allow the little weirdo to jump around 25 to 37 feet, and he'll kick you so hard you ain't getting back up. He's got flexible bone structure, superhuman stamina, durability, reflexes, and agility. Toad, like a lot of super beings, has a regenerative healing factor, but unlike a lot of mutants, he has UV vision, a super strong 30-foot prehensile tongue, acidic saliva, sticky paralytical resin out of his pores, and pheromone secretion. I can understand why he isn't exactly at the top of the mutant landscape, partially because he's kind of really gross, and just overall unpleasant, but he does have a hell of a lot of abilities to offer. Number 9, Ricochet. Now, I don't know if this is cheating, because you slap some web shooters danger, super strength, and the ability to do everything a spider can on this mutant, and you basically have Spider-Man. In fact, the superhero name and costume used by Jonathan Gallo was originally used by Peter Parker as a secondary superhero identity when Spider-Man was framed for ending someone's life. But enough about Webhead. Jonathan Gallo is a mutant with the abilities of superhuman agility and reflexes, with his agility allowing him to jump long distances, and when he combines his powers, he can almost bounce off walls in a sort of, I don't know, ricocheting type movement? But that's not all. Ricochet also has another mutation in the form of his danger sense, which is totally not the same as spider sense, except it sort of is. It allows Jonathan to sense danger before it happens. Now with his agility, reflexes, and danger sense, this mutant possesses 3 of Spider-Man's more useful abilities, but he's just different and cool enough that I can still respect him as more than some cheap knockoff. Number 8. Lifeguard. Lifeguard, or Heather Cameron, arguably has one of the most useful mutant powers possible. Her ability is called Danger Detection Response, and basically what it means is that she can detect danger to her or others' lives in her vicinity, and she can literally evolve whatever powers are necessary for her to stop those lives from being lost. She can gain more than one power at a time and is able to control said powers after just a few seconds. It also seems to be kind of limitless in what she can do. Her situation biomorphic adaptations have taken the form of growing wings for flight, extra arms for carrying and super strength, her skin turning into a sort of golden metallic super awesome armor, gills for underwater breathing with her legs even turning into a fishtail for better swimming ability, as well as simply upping her strength level from normal to superhuman. It's almost too fitting that she was an actual lifeguard before her powers emerged. She's a literal lifesaver. Number 7. Forearm. Michael McCain is the mutant under the name Forearm, an exceedingly clever name as this mutant's ability is that Forearm has 4 arms. Oh boy. Alongside his 4 arms ability, Forearm also has access to super strength, stamina, and durability. Because honestly, Forearms isn't exactly gonna save him in the majority of mutant conflicts. That being said though, I would kill to have 2 extra arms. I just can't help but imagine how useful that would be. Add to the fact that your arms are super strong, not only can you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich while texting your friends and petting a cat or something, but you can also trade 2 extra fists worth of punches with some heavy hitting mutants who only get 2 hands. For Michael, when his powers are used in unison with his extra limbs, he is a formidable close combat specialist, able to hold his own against some of X-Men's own powerhouses like Rockslide. He was a founding member of the Mutant Liberation Front, and he is now happily living on Krakoa. Number 6. Nature Girl. Although Lynn Lee started off at Jean Grey's school for higher learning, after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity is doing to the earth and to nature, she would instead become an eco-terrorist fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world, so she can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, living beings, except I guess not humans or mutants, plants, natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the earth, and the matter and energy of which all these things are composed of. Now that statement alone kind of encompasses a lot of different stuff. She can call upon animals and ally herself with them. She can make plants grow, move, and attack people. She can control the weather to a degree and heal nature to a degree too. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities. And she looks totally awesome wielding the Krakoan cudgel with her big antlers and the goat legs and stuff. Super cool. Number 5. Miranda. The only reason this character is on this list is because a lot of people have not heard of her. She doesn't even have a last name. Miranda had powers that appeared at first to be cosmic level reality warping. Warping on a level the Beast created the term Omicron level mutant to call her. He thought she was able to manipulate reality while somehow completely avoiding any damage to space or time. Like when she has stopped the Juggernaut in his path by making a well appear right below him that he was falling down millions of miles. But what Miranda's mutant power actually was control over all of Marvel's continuity. She is the one who has been keeping all of Marvel's mutants young. She's the reason the old Nick Fury got replaced by Samuel L. Jackson, and she's the reason Bucky Barnes came back as the Winter Soldier. At least she is in this alternate universe of Earth TRN 656. the one from X-Men Worst X-Man Ever. I'm just kind of curious to see if this ultra powerful mutant will ever show up in other stories or even the 616 universe at all. Number 4, Banshee. Sean Cassidy has been around for one heck of a long time in the world of Marvel's mutant community, and he has done some pretty prominent things, but his power doesn't seem like it's all that impressive, and he is kind of looked over when thinking about the mutants, but he shouldn't be. Sean has acoustic kinesis, an ability he does many cool things with. Primarily, Sean emits a sonic scream. Now the sound waves from this sonic scream have shattered solid objects, cracked skulls, and even liquefied people. But he has done so much more with this ability. He can ride the sound waves he creates using his suit to be able to fly at subsonic speeds. He can create sonar by sending out a pure signal note and listening to the returning sound. He can tighten the sound waves around himself and others to create sonic shields. And more than that though, he has been shown to affect the fluid inside people's ears with his sonic screams, being able to set them off balance and even render them unconscious. One ability that had me raising an eyebrow is the fact that Banshee can even subtly influence people's subconscious mind by changing the tones and vibrations of his voice, effectively using hypersonic suggestions and persuasive abilities. Don't sleep on Banshee, people. Number 3, Northstar. Jean-Paul Beaubier is an interesting mutant with a few different abilities. Northstar's main ability is super speed. Not really in the traditional sense of running really fast though. Northstar can propel his body at superhuman speed, becoming a living projectile, channeling a portion of the kinetic energy of his body's molecules in a single direction. It's even possible for him to reach 99% the speed of light in a vacuum. But if he were to do it on Earth or something, he'd not only damage himself, but could quite possibly break the planet. He can also super speed any part of his body, giving him superhuman reflexes and an incredibly fast metabolism to heal wounds. What's really cool is that since he is taking atomic motion from the muscles, his muscles become closer, making him superhumanly durable, allowing him to survive moving at the speeds he does without tearing himself apart. He also uses his ability to fly by projecting the kinetic energy downwards, which in turn lifts him upwards. Northstar used this ability to basically cheat as an Olympic skier, which is kind of really unfair, but whatever. And we haven't even talked about his photokinesis and concussive blasts yet, and we're not going to, so moving on. Number 2, Sage. Sage is a super genius with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice it, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and, thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jump-starting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system, almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, like desperately. And in at number 1 is Negasonic Teenage Warhead. You may remember Ellie Phimister as the super angsty Negasonic Teenage Warhead from the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool movies. And while that character was both hilarious and awesome, she is kind of pretty different in the comics. Obviously, she is still a teenager with that ridiculous yet awesome name, but her powers seem to be vastly different. Ellie's powers are psychically based, and primarily take the form of precognitive nightmares and premonitions, meaning she sees the future. Specifically, she saw disasters before they happened, which kind of explains the heightened teenage angst thing. But she would go on to start having glimpses of danger in the near future, which allows her to plan ahead or avoid attacks. She also possesses other psychic abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, and has been able to levitate. But maybe strongest of all is her abilities of reality warping and particle manipulation and absorption. Plus, some of the superhuman starter pack abilities including strength, speed, durability, and reflexes. As well as just being an awesome character, partially due to her texting movie counterpart counterpart. In at number 10 is Beltane. Beltane is a mutant you may likely not have heard of. Her real name is currently unknown, but we know she was part of a group of Romani gypsies. She was captured by the Latvarian monarch and awesome supervillain Dr. Doom and experimented on, which activated her latent mutant abilities, and also set off her desire to overthrow his rule with a group of other escapees. Now, Beltane's ability is the secret weapon of her group. She has the ability of fear projection, which means that she can physically project a manifestation of whatever the person she is facing most fears, psychically messing with and almost torturing her victims. So when fighting Wolfsbane, for example, Beltane made the hero see a projection of her not so nice father. Probably a mistake, as Wolfsbane eventually took her down in an animalistic rage, but hey, it's still a cool power. Coming in at number 9, Wolfsbane. Speaking of Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I wish I had when I was a kid. She can turn herself into a wolf at will and can even go into a transitional form that is basically a close to a werewolf without being a werewolf type of thing. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of the monster. She retains all her faculties, minus not being able to talk and just being a little bit feral, and is not forced to change only at night. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes and gains access to some enhanced strength, which, coupled with the body of a wolf, grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. She gains heightened senses similar to a wolf. The thing with Wolfsbane is that she is both a wolf and a human, so she gains the benefits of both, like almost stacking on top of each other. Unlike wolves, or humans for that matter though, she does have an enhanced healing factor and enhanced vision as well, so double thumbs up. Number 8, Abigail Brand. Abigail here is an interesting character. She is technically a human-alien hybrid, as her father hails from the planet Axis, but it's actually her human mother who Brand inherited her mutant abilities from, that allowed her to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then S.W.O.R.D. as an agent and hero. So what are said abilities? Well, she has a form of pyrokinesis known as tactile pyrokinesis, which means that Brand can coat at least her hands in flames that are potent enough to burn through most metals via tactile contact. She can use her abilities to warm up others, but has enough control that she can also set others on fire. So she has some versatility with said abilities. I somewhat kind of prefer her form of pyrokinesis because, I don't know, I just swear there are way too many fire-based heroes who seem to all do similar things. So at least Abigail has her own brand of fire. Sorry, the dad jokes are in full force today. Number 7, Primal. Adam Berman first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 16 in July 1997, and his story arc was one I actually had a good time reading. It was oddly unique, at least to me. Adam is a mutant, but his ability is a transformative one, and he can easily hide it, which allowed him to kind of play himself off as a non-mutant even though he was trying to join the Xavier Institute. That's what I gathered at least. It was kind of confusing. So you should read his story, but we are here for his abilities, not his story. And those said abilities almost remind me of other superpowered beings like the Hulk and even the Lizard, because Adam can transform into a totally primal reptilian-like form, growing about 50% bigger than his normal self and gaining red glowing eyes. But his physical enhancements are quite impressive. His strength boosts to around a level 10, with the highest level being a 100. But level 1 super strength is capable of pressing 800 pounds through a 25-ton range, so level 10 is nothing to scoff at. Look, just go read his story, okay? Number 6, Adam X. Another Adam! Almost like I liked that name or something. Adam Nuramani is honestly a bit more interesting than the last Adam though. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers of Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself like I just did, you can also say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, which is cool. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. So couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and Extreme is someone you don't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5 is Shatterstar. So I was like this close to including Longshot on this list, but he doesn't even consider himself a mutant, and there's a whole bunch of weird time mojo verse stuff going on, so instead I'm going to do his father and or son, which is a whole other thing in itself. Look, all you need to know is we're talking about Shatterstar. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack: superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Curiously though, he actually has hollow bones, which makes him a shim lighter than you would think he is, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. The cool part of Shatterstar though are his Mojoverse swords, which he can use through his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also kind of drains him of energy. But after his Mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals as well that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals. These also drain him of energy, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing. Number 4, Aurora. In the last part of this series, we talked about Northstar, but that mutant has a sister, and guess what? Surprisingly, the mutant gene runs in the family. That shouldn't be surprising really, because genes and all that. Wow, this is a horrible intro. Janine Marie Beaubier, otherwise known as Aurora, can generate a bright light, which according to the wiki is equivalent to 500,000 foot candles. Or if you aren't weird, it's about as strong as a lighthouse light, which is also an extremely weird frame of reference, but I digress. She and her brother can both do this by varying the rate of acceleration of the molecules of their bodies out of phase with one another, thereby generating a cascade of photonic discharges. The light can actually do some interesting things, like she can make a calming light that can even interrupt psychic control, or she can make concussive light blasts, or, which is even cooler, she can even create lightning blasts that actually do some considerable damage. Like her brother, she can also move incredibly fast, and thanks to her molecular manipulation, she can also be extremely durable, heal quickly, and even withstand all the g-force of moving so fast without doing those insane weird breathing exercises that pilots have to do. Number 3, Phantom X. I honestly kinda dread talking about Phantom X, but I also completely love this guy. When I first read a comic with him in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really, so now I'm gonna try and explain something to you that I do not fully understand myself. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or Jean-Philippe, if that's what you want to call him, was experimented on by Weapon Plus and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called EVA, or EVA. So there's some stuff to unpack there. EVA, or EVA, can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used as weapons, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and can enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal, and his self-supremacy over his body and mind allows him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him without taking forever, but know that he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of smell. Please look into this character and try to make sense of him, because I need help. Number 2, Somnus. Carl Valentino is actually a new member of Earth's Mutants, first appearing in Marvel's Voices Pride #1 in June 2021. But canonically, he's been around for a while. He and Dakin actually actually had a one-night stand in 1967. A one-night stand in which Dakin dreamt of them having an entire life together, which caused Dakin to retrieve Carl's body in the modern day and bring it to Krakoa for revival. Except this dream was caused by Carl himself. That's because Somnus has the mutant power of Wonneromancy, which I'm almost certain I mispronounced, but I'm kind of proud of myself that I think I didn't. This means he has the ability to enter, broadcast, and even control dreams at will. He can render his opponents unconscious and is also able to bring others into his dreamscape. It's such a unique and interesting power, and it can allow him to live entire lifetimes within a dream, which in my nerd mind tells me he can learn and improve upon skills while dreaming, but don't take my word on that, I just kinda made that up. Only time will tell the multitude of ways his power shall be used in the future. And finally, at number 1 is WizKid. A computer genius and novice inventor, Takashi Taki Matsuya kind of has an unfair advantage in the inventor game. That's because WizKid here has the ability to technoform materials and rearrange parts of things to function to his specifications, even to the point of being contrary to the laws of nature and science. And he's even recently learned how to manipulate plants and even other mutant powers to create new technology. With this ability comes a natural psionic aptitude for seeing how components can work together, which lets him make things work even better using his mutant power. As for the using of other mutant abilities, it basically means he can see the use of individual mutant powers as components, coming together as a larger machine, or even being able to guide the linking and combination of mutant powers to work collaboratively together. So he's almost like a power strategist, which is really cool, on top of the awesome technology he can already create. All this basically comes together to make WizKid someone you would absolutely want on your side, wheelchair and all. Number 10, Vanisher. Vanisher actually has the mutant ability of teleportation, but unlike mutants like Nightcrawler, Vanish's teleporting ability is completely psionic in nature and actually causes him to go through a series of extra-dimensional portals. But he does it so quickly he didn't even realize that was what he was doing. There is actually an instant where he tries to explore his powers more and stops his teleportation partway through, ending up trapped in the Dark Force dimension by its inhabitants. Vanish can also use his ability to bring a certain amount of mass other than himself with him when he teleports, which in one case allowed him to teleport himself and about 8 others from Southern California to Genosha. To add to that, Vanisher can actually also teleport any part of his body, kind of like how the Spot did it, but he does it so little that it's almost kinda not worth mentioning. Number 9, Tag. Brian Cruz, the mutant known as Tag, has the awesome ability called the Pariah Effect. Now this ability allows Brian to psionically tag a target, causing that person to emit a psionic signal that could make everyone, or even a select group of people in an area, either run away from or run towards and dogpile on top of the selected target, or who he likes to call it. The distance of this game of tag was about 100 feet, and everyone affected by the ability, excluding the one tagged, was fully aware of what they were doing while not being able to control their own actions. It's such an interesting ability, and it's fun as well because he can also tag a target with the effect of having that person run away from themselves, so they would just be uncontrollably running until he cancelled the effect. He was part of the group called the Helians until he lost his power on M-Day and passed away in a missile attack shortly afterwards. But luckily, Tag was resurrected on Krakoa, and hopefully we will get to see him use his abilities again at some point. Number 8, Hijack. Marvel's mutant David Bond actually has absolutely nothing to do with British 007s. Instead, David is the mutant known as Hijack with the technopathic ability to assume control over vehicles. It's kind of so oddly specific, and it makes me wonder if the ability works for things like bicycles or like scooters or something. This power gives me more questions than answers, to be perfectly honest. Look, he's controlled buses to ram into Sentinels, and he's even been able to control an entire SHIELD helicarrier, and even a fleet of them at one point, which is definitely no small feat of its own. His abilities have even allowed David to control technological suits of armor, but curiously he couldn't control Sentinels. Now, while his power could be used in quite a lot of different ways, David wasn't always the most useful of characters, so we didn't get a whole ton of him to analyze. Number 7, Manifold. Originally, Manifold was thought to be a teleporter, but his powers are much more than just teleportation. Eden actually has the ability to communicate with the universe and kind of ask it for certain things, and in turn the universe would change and mold to do what he wanted. So for teleportation, for example, he's actually kind of creating the Einstein-Rosen bridge and folding space to allow himself, or whatever he wants, to be teleported from wherever he is to wherever he wants. It's the same thing when he creates portals. He's used the ability to fold space around him to make him appear invisible, and he can even fold space around beings and things, like when he teleported a bit of the sun's plasma to his hand and folded space around it so it wouldn't be able to hurt him, which is a crazy thought. Even though this ability only works in his native reality, it seems like potentially an incredibly powerful ability. Number 6. La Bandera. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 2, number 19 in the December of 1989, La Bandera is said to be the daughter of a supporter of Fidel Castro, and her mutant ability is basically to be an awesome leader, which in turn apparently powers her secondary mutation. So her first mutation is as an empath, able to influence the emotions of others, which she mainly used to inspire people to fight against oppression. And then in turn, the amount of followers she had would power her energy projection powers, which she would channel through her staff. So if she has no followers, then there's no energy projection. But if she's using her empath abilities properly, then she should always have followers, right? She began fighting dealers, who she followed to the South American country of Tierra Verde, which at that point was ruled by a harsh and corrupt dictator. She teamed up with Wolverine to fight the dictator, but unfortunately she passed away at the hands of Zeitgeist in 1995 and hasn't really been talked about since, like, at all. Number 5. Blindfold. It's interesting that Blindfold wears a blindfold, as she was born with no eyes or eye sockets for her to blind with a fold. But don't think being unable to see is some kind of handicap. Blindfold is wildly powerful. Blindfold's powers are psychically based and are strongest in telepathy and wielding astral energy, which she can make solid to do a number of things, including creating armor, weapons, force fields, and energy blasts, and using it to cast her astral projections into the physical world. Using her telepathy, sometimes in conjunction with the astral plane and its energies, Ruth is capable of astral travel, psychometry, precognition, retrocognition, clairvoyance, psychic possession, mental influence, and she even has some chaos manipulation. She also has a degree of telepathic resistance, meaning telepaths can't read her mind, but they can still possibly attack it and possess it and all that fun stuff. And in at number 4 is Destiny. After talking about Ruth, it seems like a logical shift to talk about her possible great-grandmother, Irene Adler. Irene Adler, otherwise known as Destiny as a mutant, has a long history going all the way back to the 19th century, and she was even in a relationship with Mystique all the way back when. While she has her eyes, unlike Blindfold, Irene is indeed physically blind. But it's okay, as she could still see the future. That's because Destiny has the mutant power of precognition, able to mentally scan the probability spectrum of alternate futures, and by concentrating, she could focus on only the most probable alternate futures. She could scan the alternate futures that existed from 1 second away up until those that existed 15 minutes away, but she could be 97% accurate if her predictions were 10 seconds away or less, allowing her to basically see what she was doing even though she couldn't see what she was doing. Number 3. Exodus. This character is one a lot of you may actually know is pretty powerful, as he does have a seat on the Krakoan Quiet Council and is insanely capable. Exodus actually began as Grand Duke Benet du Paris in the 12th century as a nobleman hailing from the medieval France. He was sent to fight in the Crusades in the Holy Lands, and on his journey out there, that's when his mutant powers awoke. And he even gained further enhancements from the mutant apocalypse, becoming one of his champions before being entombed until the modern era when Magneto awoke him and teamed up with him. He is one of the most powerful mutants alive. He is an Omega level psionic, using the abilities of telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and empathy. His level of telekinesis is so fine-tuned that he can even use it to manipulate things on the molecular and subatomic scales, allowing him to disassemble or reassemble complex devices, explosively even, and he's even been able to do this gaining control over electrons in an atom. He can create force fields, concussive blasts, electromagnetic blasts, and fly at speeds of around Mach 2. But he further uses his telekinesis to enhance his strength, speed, and reflexes to an impressive degree, as well as using his abilities to heal himself and others, resurrecting and fixing the atoms that make up our bodies. And that's all alongside his other abilities, including enhanced durability, longevity, healing factor, and a psionic vampirism. Number 2. Cosmar. When Tashi Rapina first showed up in 2020, her mutant powers caused a little bit of a problem. Tashi has Wanaric reality warping, essentially meaning her dreams branch out and affect the reality around her, trapping her and whoever is around in the dreams. Now, people trapped in there can be physically or telepathically affected by these abilities. So, for example, when she was having a nightmare, some guards discovered her and were turned into monsters by her abilities, but it only added to the fuel of her nightmare, making things a lot more worse. Her abilities can also show others their dreams or fears. It took Wildside using their abilities to make Tashi's nightmares into a pleasant dream to free those who had been trapped inside. It's a bonkers power, and its emergence affected her physically too, which led her on a mission to try and find a way to look more human again. But her ability is definitely one of the more unique ones I've seen, with those who become trapped in her dreams being connected in one neural network with Tashi and used as a power source. Number 1. Danny Moonstar. Okay, a bunch of you guys mentioned Danny Moonstar in the comments of the last part, as there was a mutant that had a similar shtick. But Danny's powers are much more advanced than those of Beltane. While Beltane can create illusions of people's fears, Danny's powers only started here, but now she can create three-dimensional images of certain visual concepts from thoughts and emotional impressions within the minds of either herself or others. It used to be just fears, but then it moved on to deepest desires, and then as she grew, so too did her power to allow her to create images from thoughts and less intense emotions. So, as an example, as this actually happened, say Danny and Cannonball walk into a high-class hotel dressed casually. So to blend in, Danny used the image of what a well-dressed hotel guest would look like from the mind of the desk clerk and disguise both herself and her teammate in those images. She could do this with multiple people at once as well, creating illusions that were almost real to the person whom they belonged. But with a little help from Professor X, she was able to create an image that was physically tangible. That's her potential, but so far it's only happened the one time. Normally her power is used more as a psychological tool or trick, but it's not her only thing. Having powers that are psionic in nature, she can actually focus her powers into energy arrows, which can stun someone by disrupting their central nervous system or force them to relive a traumatic memory. And as she grew, these arrows became more capable of physical harm. Coming in at number 10 is Sync. Sync has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Sync can copy the powers of other mutants. Unlike Rogue, Sync has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Sync got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Sync not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but is also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is literally all the way chillin' on Mars. Sync's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Sync documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Sync even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredible significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's kinda hard to be surprised he's getting power boosts. So, yeah.
At number 9 is Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly, and I get it. He does look like if the drummer for Kings of Leon had 57 eyes, but you should never judge a book by its cover, because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including the magical plane as well. He also has night vision and even chemical detection. That's right, he can see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of.
Number 8. Domino. Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary. Under the name Domino, she was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Domino is a survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who were trying to create the perfect weapon. Tale as old as time, really. But this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she is almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight in her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will go improbably well for her, and quite poorly for her opponents. Now there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her power to work. So like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her on the head, she would still be hurt if she just stood still. But if she tried to avoid that debris, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want. But with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you can't do.
At number 7, we've got Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not might also be a case of people judging a book by its cover because he doesn't really look too menacing, if we're being honest. But to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value, so it could be that. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone he meets once he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in a huge way in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him, and they keep watching it over and over again on their coffee breaks. And the only caveat to this whole situation is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can remember Forget-Me-Not, which sort of weakens the potential for his powers in a way. So although he's more powerful than you might think, he's still got some vulnerabilities, but heck, everyone does, right? Forget-Me-Not.
Number 6. Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's new X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who's enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Now she has largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand, or dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her powers yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed 2 men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thought. But wait, there's more. It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done, as she's extremely vulnerable to water. She's a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized.
At number 5, we have Marrow. I've covered this mutant in almost every one of my lists for the last few weeks now, and for good reason. She is just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and honestly cool her powers are. And if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had some difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow is unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days, she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin, and then she can use them as weapons. She is adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own weapons and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable.
Number 4. Jubilee. Jubilee's energy plasmoids might actually be one of the most potent of the X-Men's arsenal. The plasmoids aren't fireworks, even though they look a hell of a lot like them. They're actually closer to superheated plasma. She can create a bolt of bright light, but she can also push out enough power to bend steel or destroy a tree. And with precision can even detonate microbursts inside someone's brain. So that's the amount of range we're talking about here. But that ain't all. It goes even beyond that. As Jubilee's Generation X instructor, Emma Frost, once speculated, if wielded properly, Jubilee could detonate objects on a subatomic level, meaning this unassuming mall rat can cause explosions of atomic proportions. She's a highly underrated character in the comics and gained a lot of popularity in the 90s thanks to the X-Men TV show. And while she's gone in and out of having powers, she still remains one of the cooler characters in the X-Men's lineup.
At number 3 is Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities out of all the mutants in my opinion, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's death. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance, and even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponent, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass through him.
Number 2, Gambit. Gambit has the really cool mutant ability of molecular acceleration, allowing him to convert the potential energy of a non-living object through touch and kinetically excite the molecules to the point that they explode. Usually when a mutant has an ability that manipulates molecules, they have a pretty vast array of powers. But for Gambit, he mainly uses his abilities as attacks, charging up his signature playing cards and bow staff. But in an alternate universe, there is a future variation of Gambit known as New Sun, who is what Gambit would be if he reached the full potential of his power. He can manipulate kinetic energy down to a molecular level, meaning New Sun can charge objects and living beings without being in contact with them. He can stop objects that are in motion and make still objects begin moving. He can turn into a wave of energy, letting him travel through space and other dimensions, and he was even able to defeat the Dark Phoenix in his own universe by himself. We do see 616 Gambit use a lot of the same abilities as New Sun in a fight between the two in Gambit's 1999 solo series, but just knowing the potential this awesome Cajun sensation can reach, ooh, it's spicy.
At number 1 is Chamber. Chamber is another underrated mutant with a power set that isn't quite appreciated the way it should be. It may have something to do with the trauma that Jonathan Starsmore goes through to acquire his powers, and further how that experience hinders him from achieving certain goals that other more accomplished mutants are able to. Basically, Chamber has what's described as a furnace of psionic energy stored in his chest, and when his powers are first discovered, this energy explodes out of him, destroying the lower half of his mouth and blowing a hole in his chest cavity, forcing him into intensive surgery to reconstruct the lost body parts. Eventually, he hones his powers to a point where he can aim psionic blasts on command, which is kind of like Cyclops, except in this case it's coming out of a hole in his chest. But what's more is that Chamber later learns that he's in fact a descendant of Apocalypse, and he is eventually properly reconstructed by Clan Akaba in the appearance of Apocalypse. Although this leads him into a depression, Chamber then gets a huge power boost from this modification and changes his name to Decibel before joining the New Warriors.
Jean Grey exists in a kind of gray area here. There's only so many secondary mutations out there, please be kind. Jean Grey has the Phoenix, but this ain't about them. This is about the time she lost her powers and then got them back. Miss Grey absorbed Psylocke's telepathy and lost her telekinesis, but not for long, she just got it back. And there wasn't an explanation, so Beast just made the connection that it must have been her secondary mutation, and he would know. Amanda gets into Beast's secondary mutation in part 1, go check it out if you haven't yet. Back to Jean. But what does the mutation that she gets mean for her and even other mutants? It potentially means she can restore her powers and come back from anything, and maybe even repower depowered X-Men. Of course, that's really up for debate, so let me know what you think down below. Cyberine, unfortunately not a ship name for Cyclops and Wolverine, instead it's the name of the Wolverine version that killed Cyclops. Do I see an enemies to lovers plotline in the future? Wouldn't that be wild? while considering the whole Jean Grey thing. That is so not important. Anyway, so on Earth 517, that's the Marvel Contest of Champions Earth, Wolverine kills Cyclops. Hurting a friend to that extent is traumatic, and the psychological aftermath of it all caused Wolverine to experience a secondary mutation. This mutation allegedly was mimicking Cyclops' powers. So now we have a Wolverine with all his regular bells and whistles that also basically has laser eyes. New fear unlocked. Richard Gill of Earth 616 is better known as Wildside. He was a founding member of MLF, the Mutant Liberation Front. They are not good guys. His original mutation was hallucinations. He did this likely through telepathy, and he was pretty good at it. Unfortunately for him, he was depowered after M-Day. But hey, he survived, and that counts for something. He did eventually get his special talent back through the Mother Vine thing, plus a couple bonuses that made him an even bigger problem than before. They made his powers the same, but better. Instead of just hallucinations in the head, they were also kind of physical. As long as Wildside is conscious to keep it running, you're basically in a fever dream that feels super real and you can feel pain in. But if you knock him out, you're good. Black King, not to be confused with Black Tom from part 1, Black King is a billionaire genius energy absorption secondary mutantist. He develops a secondary mutation. That's the point. Sebastian Shaw's original special skill is the energy absorption thing. He can use the absorbed kinetic energy to make himself stronger, faster, and just basically enhance himself. This makes him hard to beat. Many heroes are known for their ability to pack a punch, so what do when the better the punch you give, the better the enemy gets? Mental stuff. The secondary mutation comes when Sebastian underwent the Mother Vine enhancement process. The bonus he gets is that now he doesn't even need to get punched to absorb the kinetic energy. He can just absorb what's around him. Good for him, bad for everybody else. He also develops concussion blasts. The energy he absorbs can be like thrown at somebody. Wolverine's kiddo on Earth 1610 is taking after his dear old dad. James Jimmy Hudson Jr. has got the it factor, healing factor, and claws. First comes all that, and then comes the indestructible skeleton. His secondary mutation is that his skeleton gets coated in an organic metal. Wolverine famously has the Atom skeleton after going through a brutal, rough procedure, but his son, he just comes with it built in. It's what lets the kid have metal claws just like his dad. The metal trick can also make a pretty sturdy mouthguard. Unfortunately, Jimmy never knew his dad. Jimmy was adopted early in life, like newborn early, by Wolverine's friend James Hudson. But Jimmy did know the X-Men. Kitty Pryde was one of the first to meet him. She brought some of Wolverine's stuff and a hologram of Wolverine explaining to Jimmy that he was his son. She encouraged him to try out his mutations for the first time. Sabretooth doesn't just hate Wolverine, apparently. He hates the whole family tree because Sabretooth attacked little Jimmy too. Well, he was a teen at the time, so he wasn't that little. Some parents pass down family rings and some enemies for life. If you are trying to find Jimmy online, you might see the alias Poison attached to it. Well, one horrible day, the Poison Hive invaded Earth 1610. One invaded Jimmy. Long story short, most of the poisons end up eliminated, but lucky for Jimmy, not the one in him. That one dubs itself just Poison and walks the earth in Jimmy's body. They are not on the same side at first. They are each fighting for control of the body, but eventually their physical form is threatened. They have to put aside their differences to survive and agree to work together to escape. Eventually they head off together to figure out how to co-inhabit one body, and all of this happened in the Ultimate Universe. Sharon Ginsburg is like the Elwoods and Batwoman of the Marvel Universe. Let me explain. She is a mutant, but her civilian job is being a lawyer. Lawyer by day, Batwinged mutant by night, or whenever she needs her wings. She is made for flying. Her bones are lighter and she is smaller than the average person. Her wings are massive, like at least a 15-foot wingspan, but because this is Marvel and everything is possible, she can easily hide the wings. The wings are her whole identity in terms of mutanthood, so losing those wings, that's a lot of trauma and pain, and apparently the exact right amount to trigger a secondary mutation. Her secondary mutation brings in even more bat qualities. When her wings were roughly removed, she fell unconscious. Eventually waking up, she realized they were gone. She was so upset and angry, she manifested bat claws and she went insane. She was captured in X-Statix 11 and we haven't seen her since. I hope she's doing well. Thanks to a secondary mutation, Havoc can wreak havoc forever. But first, Alex Summers' talents include energy absorption, even from something like a star. Because of that bit with the star, he is definitely immune to extreme heat and radiation too. He shoots plasma blasts, usually from his arms. They can be used as a weapon or or to even help him fly. So that's pretty much everything he had going on before the secondary mutation. His secondary mutation appeared in the Mutant X storyline. Alternate reality versions of Alex Summers got yanked together by a cosmic force, and we don't really learn that anything serious mutation-wise has happened until Alex passes away, then doesn't. He wakes up in a different timeline in a different version of himself. Now, he has the ability to shift his consciousness from one version of himself to the next. Can he die? Maybe. Being a host for the Nexus of all realities is what caused this. You've heard of Mother Earth. Get ready for Nature Girl. She does go by a few names, and I was not prepared for one of them. Her civilian name is Lynn Lee, but her other mutant name is Armageddon Girl. That's a 180 from Nature Girl. It is fitting though, because she did do a 180. She started out as a hero. She attended the School for Gifted Youngsters, named the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning at the time. It had been established that she could control or influence nature and animals. Make birds carry her, plants fight for her, that kind of stuff. She goes off the rails and joins the bad guys. Bad for everyone else, but good for her because she discovers her secondary mutation. She not only has a connection to all things in nature and can influence them, she can draw power from them to make herself more powerful. The power she is drawing though is basically the thing's life force, so she usually ends up killing whatever it is that she's drawing from. Right around one of the last times we saw her in the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comic is when she started going by the name Armageddon Girl. Pietro and Wanda are probably the most, maybe, famous mutants, it's a whole thing with them, of the Marvel Universe, but there's another set of definitely mutant power twins that deserve some attention too. North Star and Aurora. They are a beacon of light, literally. When they were babies, they were separated after a car crash killed their parents. While separated, they both learned of their mutant abilities on their own throughout their teenage years. Both twins are very fast. North Star used this to become an Olympic champion. They can both fly, but their big trick only appears when they are together, so sweet. When they physically touch, they can generate a powerful, bright light. It can blind or simply just distract enemies. The secondary mutation manifests after a series of experiments requested by Aurora so that the twins can do the whole light thing without touching. It works, and now they both have a semi-new talent. Angelic X-Men Warren Worthington III was just a guy until he got his wings. Then, he was a mutant with the ability to shockingly fly. The wings have other uses too, they are really strong, so he can use them to fight. Angel, unfortunately, got mixed up with Apocalypse, and Apocalypse planted a death seed in Warren. Warren becomes Archangel on his way to being the next Apocalypse, which is a very bad thing. He doesn't get there though, good news. What he does get is healing blood. Kind of. Warren himself gets an accelerated healing factor, but if you were to get a blood transfusion from him, that blood is supercharged with the healing powers. We see this happen in Uncanny X-Men 420. I'll take a wild guess and say that he's got the universal blood type. He also got blue skin. He used to be just a guy. Look at him now.
I've never been deep in the know when it comes to Elixir, so it was cool to find out that something I thought was just a core part of his standard mutation is actually perhaps secondary. For this point, we're talking about Elixir's physical mutation, the golden hue of his skin. This change occurred shortly after his first appearance. Only a few issues later, he actually uses his powers to heal himself and his skin changes to a golden color. So it seems to make sense that I wouldn't know this was even a secondary mutation since most of his appearances have been with this look. Joshua Foley, aka Elixir's skin, also changes color when he uses his powers to harm others, changing from a golden hue to a deep metallic black color. The changing of his skin is not something that Elixir also seems to be able to control, but instead is a mutation that is closely tied to his primary healing and death touch abilities. If your skin changed color anytime you did anything, what would you definitely want it to be or not want it to be? While many heroes have secondary mutations, let's not forget that this whole idea in terms of when it was classified started with Emma Frost, who herself was once a famous villain. Likewise, there have been other villains who have also gained a secondary mutation, but who simply aren't as well known. Enter Black Tom Cassidy, a classic mutant villain, and if you aren't familiar with him, you should be. He's pretty cool. His secondary mutation has changed somewhat throughout his history. It's been described as giving him the upgraded ability to channel his bioblast through his fists, as opposed to needing wood to channel said blast, which is what he originally had, giving him his own plant form, and giving him the power to manipulate plants and wood around him. Like many others on our list, Black Tom actually got this sort of secondary mutation from being mortally wounded, but yeah, it's changed changed a lot throughout the years in terms of exactly how it works or what it does. It feels weird to include Beast also on this list, but when I think about most people I know who love the X-Men, they usually always think of Beast as being default blue. Now this is because most of the people I know grew up with the 90s or early 2000s Beast after he'd undergone his secondary mutation. Many fans out there still don't know that Beast's original power set was just that he was like super dexterous. He just looked like a guy. He had big feet, big hands, and he swung around a lot. Initially, Beast looked like this guy, but after being exposed to a serum he created, which isolates and boosts the X gene in mutants, he became permanently mutated again, gaining the secondary mutation of the blue fur. In fact, I think Beast may be the first mutant in comics to have developed a secondary mutation, before we even had a terminology for it at that time. He mutated. He's all covered in blue fur, which initially was actually like a gray fur, but that's a whole other story. That has to do with comics coloring and miscommunications and just how blues and blacks got often mixed up by people. With this next one, we're not talking about that time that Kitty Pryde was turned into a cat person in Wundagore, although that was a thing that happened. It was something though that she was given as opposed to an evolution of her mutant-based abilities, and it was temporary. With Kitty, or Kate, it's interesting as there are a few different instances where I feel one could argue that she manifested some kind of secondary mutation, or more specifically evolution of her powers. But this has also, I don't believe, ever fully been confirmed in the comics. Let me know if I missed something and if there is a page where someone says, this is a secondary mutation. I'd like to focus on the heightening of her powers over the years, which I believe is the version of a secondary mutation, as I understand what secondary mutations are, which can either be a significant power boost or it can be something additional. Some people, however, see secondary mutations as just something new and concrete added to a mutant's power set, like Emma Frost's Diamond Form, which exists separate from her telepathy, but it doesn't need to be that. And in fact, I think a major power boost does count, hence why I'm counting it. And if you don't agree, we can debate about it in the comments. Like when Kitty stopped needing to hold her breath while intangible, or when she was merged with the Black Vortex, becoming all-powerful, but then after giving up the Black Vortex's power, discovered that she had unlocked a new level of power through that, so after using it, it was kind of like an additional mutation. As I said, there are actually multiple moments for Kitty when I feel like this has happened, but those are the main ones that come to my mind. Speaking of folks who have seen major power boosts throughout the years, enter Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. Iceman has had a few different moments like Kitty Pryde where I would say his powers have evolved, and which could be considered a secondary mutation as he severely leveled up. When he learned he could manipulate his body into more than just ice or snow and learned to use his water form. When he learned he could just become straight up ice. That was a whole thing, because before he was, I believe, covered in it. When he healed back up after having his ice form shattered. And when he learned he could make ice clones. Honestly, Bobby's just had a lot of moments because he's super OP. Sync developed a pretty powerful secondary mutation after he returned from the dead during the Krakoan era, so this is a recent one, so you might not know if you're not following with modern comics, or maybe you are and you're like, oh my gosh, this is the one I do know. His secondary mutation is more suspected, I would say, than confirmed. Well, we know he has this ability now, but we don't necessarily know if it is a secondary mutation or not. The ability in question is that he can now remain synced with other mutants even without being near them. I believe the idea is if he's synced with you once, he can kind of sync with you whenever, but of course there are some limits to this and we're still kind of figuring out how that works. I don't think that sync using those powers if you're not near him would be as powerful. However, this mutation also takes a toll on his body and it seems to age him faster every time he uses it. In addition to this, he can also sync with superpowered non-mutants as well, which is huge. As I said, the full extent of his newfound abilities has not been explored, and I don't know if everyone would consider them to be a secondary mutation, as they're still tied to the same power set, but I personally do. I believe secondary mutations can also manifest in a boost to a predetermined power set, and I think this should count. To me, it's a secondary mutation, so there you go. Take it or leave it. Cypher is another hero who went from being kinda lame to kind of insanely powerful thanks to his own secondary mutation. Honestly, I've become a pretty big Doug fan in recent years, now that I better understand just how powerful his power set can be. I think my love of Doug comes from me also realizing just as a person how important communication is in my everyday life, and how much I value being around other people who can communicate well, and also value my ability to communicate with them. When we can't understand each other, it actually creates big problems in our lives, and that's what I appreciate about Doug and his power set. His ability to communicate, and through that resolve so many issues without even needing to come to blows. In terms of his mutation, we saw him go from a character who could just understand all languages and communicate with people in that way, to someone who really understood the various minute types of languages around us that often go unnoticed, and thereby become a master of those types of languages as well. Things like technology, and even at one point physically fighting, which is a sort of physical communication or language and dance. This shift in his abilities happened after Doug died and was resurrected, and it honestly puts him on a whole other level, and really he's pretty powerful. I know sometimes we say, oh, communicating, is that powerful? Actually it is. I always forget about Kid Omega's secondary mutation because it just very rarely comes up in the comics anymore. Probably because Quentin Quire no longer finds it interesting, at least that's the canon reason that we were given for this. Though I personally think it sounds super interesting, and I am surprised that he is bored of it. However, this is Quentin, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. He is often unimpressed by some of the coolest stuff, or at least he presents himself this way often. Kid Omega's secondary mutation here is a non-corporeal form, which when accessed also speeds up his consciousness and allows him as a telepath to reach out and connect with all sentient beings. He can think at the speed of light while in this form, but then again, even when Quire isn't in it, he is known for being one of the fastest thinkers and one of the smartest psionics on the planet. Maybe that's why he was like, it's alright. I become like whatever, I don't have a physical form, but like, I'm pretty cool even when I have a physical form. Said to be the daughter of Unis the Untouchable, one of the earliest X-Men villains, Carmella's mutant power set is similar to her father's. However, at one point her powers evolved even beyond her own control. This seems to be a result of being exposed to Mother Vine, which triggered a secondary mutation in her. This mutation would cause her energy field to overcharge the more she used it, making it more devastating in terms of the damage it did to the people and technology around her. And if you aren't familiar with Unis the Untouchable, his main thing was that you couldn't touch him because he had a field around him that made it impossible to touch him. But this is also a field that blasts out in Carmella's case as well. What was worse, she had no control really over the power of her energy field, and she also suffered as a result thanks to overcharge resulting in a backlash. So when it happened, she would also be in pain as well. So she'd be causing pain to others and then also be like, ow. I mean, I know she's like a villain normally, but still, sucks, you know? That would suck, whether you're a villain or not. Something about people being in near-death experiences that seemingly allows them to evolve out of survival. Mask is another one of those mutants, and Mask was inherently more of a villain in the comics, and also a Morlock. However, being a Morlock wasn't what made him evil, because Morlocks are not inherently evil. What made him evil was his outlook on life. His mutant powers allowed him to alter the appearance of others, basically turning him into one of the world's most powerful plastic surgeons. But at the same time, Mask was considered himself to be hideous, hence why he hid in the underground tunnels of New York with the Morlocks and usually led them. And his powers did not work on his own physical appearance. That is, until he was killed by Shatterstar. To survive, he had to move his organs around, and this actually unlocked the power within him to manipulate his own appearance. For a while, he actually used his powers to appear as Marilyn Monroe, no I'm not kidding, while leading the Morlocks. Although now Mask has seemingly gotten over his obsession with beauty and chooses to mostly appear just as he is. A friendly reminder to love yourself, friends. Take a page out of Mask's book. Actually, at least I think that's what happened to him. I don't know, I haven't read every single Mask issue, so. But if there isn't a Mask issue where he realizes, you know what, maybe I should love myself as I am, there should be one. And if there isn't, Marvel, if you need someone to write it, I'll write it for you.